Okay. We'll open this meeting of the Yamhill County Board of Commissioners formal and informal session for October 29th of 2020. And we'll begin with the flag salute. And Commissioner Olson, can you lead us? Certainly. Okay, thank you. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, sir. Move on to our calendar session. And commissioners, is there anything we need to add to the joint calendar?
I don't think so.
Okay. There's nothing I can actually think of either right now. So, okay, great.
Yeah.
We'll move on to public comment. And due to COVID-19 and physical distancing requirements, anyone wishing to submit general public comment or comments related to a specific agenda item may do so in written format via email at bocinfo@co.yamhill.or.us or by mail at 535 Northeast 5th Street, McMinnville, Oregon, 97128. Any comments received prior to the meeting will be shared with the Board of Commissioners and submitted to the record. Okay. Carolina says no. All right, thank you very much. Move on to item E, which is our work session. And this time is reserved for topics of discussion scheduled for the commissioners in advance. And item E1 is a work session review and discussion of 185 Maple Street, Yamhill, Oregon property.
Sure.
Yes.
If I may, before we go into the work session, before we move on to the public comment, I just wanted to acknowledge, I believe you received an email. But in looking at it, the request from Roxanne W. was actually a request to have it entered as a request into public comment.
Oh, okay.
Period, but I believe you received those emails.
We
I just
did.
wanted to clarify that there was a request, so it was from Roxanne. So, and that was sent to you, and I just wanted to acknowledge that and have it acknowledged.
Yes, thank you very much.
And we've been in touch, and Carrie Martin's been in touch to explain the difference between the resubmittal and the prior application, and that, and then there was also a request to have it as an executive session. So I think that she maybe didn't understand the correct
Totally.
pipeline for all that, but Carrie has spoken to her, and everything is good.
That's it. Carrie Ann, is that what you said?
I said Carrie.
And I had scrolled ahead to it with a comment and request from Roxanne.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yes. Yes, and the community grants program, the portal is open, so
Yes.
very exciting.
Online.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, thank you. We will begin then our review and discussion of the 185 Maple Street property in the city of Yamhill. And we have Philip Higgins on behalf of probably the Yamhill Downtown Association and the city.
Yeah,
Okay.
Unfortunately, Mayor Potter extends her apologies. She has been caught up in her day job with Washington County and is not able to gracefully.
Okay.
Dang Washington County.
Yeah,
And then we have Mary Camarata from DEQ who's available right now, and it looks like Carolina is going to call her up. So if we want to ask questions of Mary Camarata, I love the thank you for the smile. I have to say it every time just to make sure. Then she'll be available right now as well. Would we like to invite Commissioners Philip Higgins to come up to the microphone and state his name and address for the record?
Sure.
Okay.
Thank you.
And then I guess he can just sit there too,
Yes.
since we have so many people here.
holdings for the Yamhill Downtown Association as well as acting at the city Yamhill. My address is 415 West Woodwood Drive.
Great. Thank you very much. And Mary Camarata, are you on the phone today?
Yes, Mary Camarata with the Oregon Department of Environmental Quality is on the phone.
Thank you so
Morning,
much for
everybody.
joining
Good
us.
morning.
Good morning, Mary.
Mary Camarata and Commissioner Starrett is smiling because I want to make it clear whom I'm addressing. Mary, we have some questions about the process of having cleanup done through DEQ while the county retains ownership versus the city of Yamhill. Can you clarify both? You've explained that having the county retain ownership during the property cleanup is your preferred option, but I'm wondering if you could give us more detail about that?
Sure. So basically, the federal government has set up programs that it's easier for the county because you foreclosed on the property to get access. If it gets transferred to the city, it just takes more effort to get them qualified. And one thing that the city would have to do is they would have to do their own phase one environmental assessment, which is a desktop report that looks at, what's the history of the site and what's the known contamination. So it would be easier for the state to have the county retain ownership and use the funds available for the county, and then once it gets a clean bill of health, then the county can do it if you want to sell it or quick deed it or however you want to work out the arrangements with the city is the best approach and normally how this is handled in all the United States and in Oregon.
Okay. Commissioners, do you
No, I
want to
think
follow
that
up?
explained it, that even though the city could have it, it sounds to me like it would be better off for us to do it, do all the cleanup, and then determine what we're going to sell it like to the city of Yanmar, where can us do the cleanup. Because it sounds like just what Mary's saying, just the paperwork that the city would have to go through to get, they can still do it, but they qualify, and everything would just push it out that much longer, So,
Yeah, and also the county, because of the foreclosure, has protection that the city doesn't have. So the county is not considered a responsible party if the county does not do anything to exasperate the situation, so which you're not. So that, and the city does not have that protection. That's why they have to do that phase one report, whereas you guys don't need to do that.
Okay. Commissioner Starrett, did you?
I had a question about the costs associated with a phase one for the city.
Sure. It would probably run about $3,000 to $5,000 to do that, and that even when assuming that the county will work with me on getting the funding, then the city would be good for them to do that because that's something that the EPA requires. It's called due diligence. Now, depending on what funding we are able to use, we may have that funding cover that cost for the city. So we haven't entered in an agreement yet, but there is sometimes we do that where, like in this case in Marion County, there's a property that City of Jefferson's going to get, and we did the assessment, that'd be DQ, and then we're going to do the phase one, so within 6 months of the transfer, so that the City of Jefferson will get all the paperwork they need. So that's what I would propose for this. But again, we have to go through the funding to see if that's an eligible cost for the city. Because I would like to make it as not have the city or the county have too much coming out of their pockets. Because I know that everybody's strapped for funds.
Follow up?
Thank you. Kristen, you said something earlier about there was some incorrect assumptions made in regard to the city versus the county.
Yeah, I mean, I think Mary's confirmed what my understanding is that it is possible for the city to pursue the cleanup once the property has been transferred to them. I don't know what other requirements might exist beyond a requirement to do a phase one, but my understanding is that there is a pathway for the city to have access to some of that, if not all of the same state and federal funding. And if I'm wrong about that, Mary, please correct me.
Well, the thing is for the city to do the work, I mean, I would recommend that first we secure the funding before anybody transfers anything. And then they would have to do their phase one prior to it being transferred. And then basically then the city could have access to the funds to do the work. My proposal for the county is, I talked to Business Oregon, and they have what's called a revolving loan fund, which EPA puts together, and that can both pull the tanks and remove some soil if we have low contamination around the tanks, which we might have that, and then work through the process to get a no further action or a clean bill of health. Now, if the county's like, no, I want the city to do that, then we'll have to have conversations with Business Oregon to make sure the city can qualify for that funding. Because I don't want to speak for that. I know the county qualifies for the funding, but we would have to go through the process to get the city to be qualified for it.
What kind of process is that, Mary? How long and how arduous?
You're gonna have to fill out some paperwork. You're gonna have to get that phase 1 done to demonstrate you've done your due diligence. And we have to get it approved by EPA. So since you have not owned and operated this facility, it should be doable. But unless you go through the process, you know, it's not 100%. You know what I mean?
For the city?
Whereas for the county, we know they automatically qualify because of the foreclosure.
Okay.
Thank you.
And then, Mary, can you, thank you for your patience. But I'm saying that to Philip, not to Mary, sorry. Mary Camarata, can you explain the process of having you at DEQ act as the project manager versus the county versus the city? Because you and I talked about that, but.
Yeah, so some counties are able to get a grant and run the grant. And so with this funding from Business Oregon, we have a couple options. So if the county wants to hire their own consultant and do the work, that's one scenario. If the county wants to enter in, or even the city for that matter, wants to enter into an agreement with DEQ, we would basically act as the project manager, hire the consultant, do the work, and then at the end of the project, issue the report to the county or the city that the site is clean and ready to go. So I think when, if you don't have a robust, planning department or somebody that's going to run your contract, entering an agreement with DEQ to do it, I think is a good way. But again, it can go either way. Some counties want to have the control, which is fine, no problem there. And other counties are like, yeah, great, let DEQ do the work. We don't want to worry about hiring a tank removal and going through trying to figure out how much soil to remove. We'll let DEQ do that. So either way, it's fine with us.
Okay, thank you.
So I think Commissioner Cooley, you asked how long this would take, and because we have to go through the paperwork with the federal government, which is EPA, and if we enter agreement with DEQ to do it, with our contractors front up, I was thinking that this is something that could probably be completed by the spring, just to be realistic. It does take a while to get approved. And even if the city or the county does it themselves, you still have to go through the contracting process yourself, get somebody on board. Then you're going to have to give DEQ the paperwork because we have to prove that the cleanup was done well. And so I would figure, I don't know what people's plans are, but I would say, probably a springtime completing of the project would be a good schedule, a good estimate of how long it would take.
Okay, great, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I think Mary answered my question as far as the project management.
Okay. Okay. Do we have more questions for Mary? I'm trying to think if there's more that I've already asked that I'd like to ask again.
No, I think Mary did a good job of explaining, like she did
Yeah,
to you,
thank
explaining us the different options, whether the county does it, the city does it, when we manage it, have DEQ management, how we do that. So.
Yeah.
Mary, I have a question.
Go ahead.
Is it feasible still to do any of the preliminary assessment or even some of the initial cleanup work through the winter? Or are we basically looking at waiting until things have dried out a little bit in the spring?
Oh no, you can do it in the wet. You just have to make sure you have we call them spill pillows down and stuff, so that you don't have stuff running down the asphalt. But it's paved, so yeah, we can do it in we don't want to do it in the pouring rain, but you can do it on a drizzle day and pull everything and collect your samples and all that. It makes the groundwater get tired. So if you get water in the hole, has a sheen, that can cost a little bit more to deal with. So we will evaluate that, but that would be the only negative thing is if you get high groundwater and it has a sheen, then you have to run that water through a filter system before you can discharge it. So that would be the negative, but otherwise, yeah, we work in the winter.
Then I want to just have you reconfirm something else that you and I discussed. I think it'd be helpful for the board and everyone to hear that to the extent there is the federal and the state funding available, if in a worst case scenario, the cleanup exhausted all of that available funding, it could be possible that we would clean up the property, we being the city or the county, but one of us would clean up the property to the extent of the availability of the funding and then stop.
Yeah, so how that would work, I'm assuming this is Christian.
Yeah, sorry.
How this works is, okay, so you pull the tanks out, and we've already done some sampling in kind of the mid-2000s, because we were looking for sites that were open that we had owners that weren't doing what they were supposed to. So we went in there, sampled around the tanks and the pump island, and actually triple rinsed out the tanks and sealed them. So hopefully the previous owner, Kara Glover, did not put anything in them or did anything after we closed them up. We know that there's low level contamination, and we're assuming that we're not going to have a major cleanup here. But how this works is you clean up to the point where it's protected. You don't have to get back to no release. That's really hard to do and very expensive. So you look at, where the contamination is. It in the right of way? Is there a problem of vapors getting into the building? Things like that. And so it's okay to leave some contamination in place if that's what happens. But we'll make sure that the levels that we leave will not make people sick who use the site or make city workers sick who have to dig in the right of way. So that's part of what we do. It's not really based on if you run out of money you can stop. It's really based on being protective.
Okay.
And if you run out of money and you can't get to the no further action, the clean bill of health, then you just put it all back together and then you wait till the more funding comes. I really don't think that's going to be our scenario because of our previous sampling, but that's why we have to pull the tank to see what's underneath it, because sometimes you can't tell because we actually can't punch a hole in the tanks. We sample on the outside of the tanks and use groundwater to tell us if there's a problem or not. So.
Yeah. No, I mean, that's helpful.
Yeah.
For me, and thank you for clarifying that, because that was my understanding. It's not ideal if you sort of stop at a point where you're not quite to a no further action letter. Obviously, that is the best outcome for everyone, including any sort of a potential owner. But it's possible that you can stop short of that if you need to. So my concern, and I think what the commissioners wanted to understand, was whether or not there is sort of a blank check in terms of cleanup cost.
No, and we know that's why I would prefer to keep it in the county's hands, because you're protected more than the city. And again, it's easier for me to get more funds than I can for the city, just because of the way the laws are written. It has nothing to do with anything wrong with the city. It has to do with the foreclosure process. You guys having to take something over, so that's why it's done that way. So does that help everybody kind of understand
That
the
helps
process
me.
now?
Yeah, that helps
County
me. Thank you.
owes about $5,400, and it sounds weird, registration fees for the tanks, and that's just part of the program when you have tanks in the ground like that. And then foreclosure doesn't erase that, unfortunately. It erases a lot of things, but it erased our lien against Carol Glover, so we never got recovery of that. But it doesn't release the need to pay these fees. So that's something that the county, it's about $5,400 roughly, that we'll need to pay, or somebody needs to pay to close this out. And we can't use the federal funding to pay for the fee. That's not acceptable cost.
And Mary and Camarata and I talked about that yesterday, and she was like, "Gosh, I don't know. I need to find out." So we got that found out whether you can use the federal funds.
Okay.
And Mary, those are fees through this year, right?
I included the 2021 fees because the tanks are not getting out of the ground before this year is up. I mean, just realistically, so we have to pay the 2021 fees. So this is for 2018 when you took it over,
Right.
19, 20, and 21. And a lot of counties don't realize that. I try to help the property managers understand that, you know, please, when you cut a gas station, you foreclose on, talk to DEQ right away so we can help you with this, managing this cost.
Other questions for Mary now?
No, I don't have.
No, thank you.
Okay. Christian, do you
So
have
I
more
do want to
questions?
understand, so the next process, so you guys are having a working meeting, and then will somebody get back to DEQ that this is how you want to proceed, so we can get the funding lined up and figure out who's going to actually do the work?
I think
Yes.
so. Yeah, we'll determine what sort of a plan we have with the city going forward, and then I'm happy to reach out and talk to you after we've got some more details there.
Okay. I'm really
And that was
excited
Christian.
because it's like we all want to get this done and get it back to productive use. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Just let me know when you guys are able to make that decision. Or if you need more information, I'd be more than happy to come back and have that conversation with you.
And I think, Mary, if you're interested, you're welcome to stay on the line too, but if you need to go.
Yeah, I think we're gonna, Mary, this is Casey. I think that we're gonna grill Philip Higgins from the Downtown Association and representing the city of Yamhill. So brace yourself, right? But thank you so much for joining us, and please feel free to stay on the line.
Thank you.
Okay, do you need me to have any more conversation or just to listen in?
We may ask you more, potentially.
Okay.
Okay, so thanks for your patience. Commissioners, would you like to hear from
Yes.
Philip Higgins on behalf of the city of Yamhill and Downtown Association?
Well, so everything that Mary said tracks with my 25 years of experience in selling gas stations as well as operating for lending institutions in sort of the foreclosure arena. So I think she very well explained how all that works in terms of liability. I was, obviously it's going to be significantly easier for the county because of their position as the foreclosing entity to obtain funding for this. Again, I've been asked to say that the city of Yamhill will help in any way that they can to offset impacts to the county in terms of costs associated with this. And we can figure out sort of what those things look like. But, there's a willingness to do that to the best of the city's ability from a budget standpoint. That's really what we're looking forward to. They have a high level of interest in actually owning the property at the end of the day for reasons that we've covered here before in terms of it being front and center on our main street. And there's a bunch of economic development work that we want to leverage this property for once it's owned by the city. So we're excited to see not only the EQ file be resolved, but this property come back into productive use and contributing to the tax rolls and contributing to the vitality of our community. So anything we can do, let us know. I will also again bring up the property preservation issue as we move into the damp and wet, trying to figure out what we can do to either work together or if the county's going to take point on, getting the building envelope secured so that we don't have rodents and other intrusion in the actual building, because we would love to have a building at the end of the day that's, doesn't require a lot of, extra capital in on top of it to fix it up to get it usable.
Right.
So. Yeah, any questions anybody has, I'm more than happy to respond to.
I don't know if we are ready to kind of discuss it yet in a work session, but I think we discussed different ways of either selling it to the city of Yamhill.
Mhm.
And I don't know if Phil has any insight of what the city of Yamhill may be willing to do at this time. So do you have any, Phil, can you get any Main Street grants or anything?
Yeah, I mean, so
Mhm.
one of the benefits of taking advantage of Mary Camarata's offer for the BEQ to run the decommissioning of it, which I also highly recommend doing, as opposed to looking for third-party contractors on this, is it gives us the time to, offset any sort of budgetary impacts the city would have for acquiring this property through seeking grants through, Mid-Valley Council of Governments, as well as, Main Street programs. So, and we're in talks with those entities as well as Sedcor and Business Oregon on how we can get all this sort of stuff lined up and pulled off. So.
Well, it's great to have our wonderful Sedcor representative with us today, sitting in the back. Abishaw's in the back. And believe me, if anybody can help you, she can help you. So no, that's the only thing.
Commissioner Sterrett.
So opportunity zone, brownfield type of considerations in terms of funding?
I don't believe any of Yamhill's in an opportunity zone, unfortunately. I wish it all was. In terms of brownfield, we're hoping to resolve the brownfield issue. So we're hoping to take it over without it being brownfield. But, we have, and obviously we have some other things to contribute on that, but,
Yeah, I'm sorry to jump in.
Yes.
I
We have you here,
I
so-
will try to get here before he was done
Yeah, absolutely.
presenting, is that we are actually working with the Business Oregon's Brownfield Program Manager. I have a call with her next week to talk about this property and a couple other properties, and to start preparing for kind of a brownfield management program and a shovel-ready program for Yamhill County.
Great.
And this is one of the projects that's driving those conversations. So
Yeah, 'cause
it
there's
is
plenty of
on
other
our agenda.
sites.
Say again?
Sorry, there's plenty of other sites as well, so.
There are, yes, there
Yes.
are. Yeah, but this is one of our priority projects because it has so much support and energy with the city and kind of this work doing with Mary Camarata with the state and seeking that additional funding, that it's kind of a no-brainer sort of a project to bring in early on.
Excellent.
Great.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Abishaw. Thank you.
Yeah.
Glad you're here.
And for us too, as, both the Yamhill Downtown Association and the city of Yamhill, one of the things that we're looking to do is work with all these partners, specifically because it sort of puts the right foot forward for us. It shows that Yamhill is sort of entering into sort of a new decade of interacting with public and private partnerships to better the town. So, these sort of partnerships are critical for us, not only in getting the work done, but I think also critical in terms of setting the tone.
I guess in light of that, I would say, do we have further discussion? I was just thinking that the proposal, as I could see it, the simplest way to go forward, I guess, would be that the county enters an agreement to sell the property to the city, but that at the same time that the property or the county works with DEQ to do the cleanup as much as we can do it before it transfers ownership. That makes sense. So we're doing both at the same time, but come to the same location, which is transferring the ownership, especially if it's a relatively short time frame. So that would be how I would propose
Being
to
a
do it.
relatively short time frame and knowing the complexity and technical that goes into a cleanup, I guess I would recommend too that, if we move forward with this, that DEQ actually provide the project management, because they go through this all the time. We can figure out how to do this and how to do that, but DEQ goes through it all the time. So it would be my advice that we enter an agreement with DEQ to manage that the county would do the cleanup, would enter with the DEQ to manage the actual cleanup. And then we will work on what the value of the sale would be after it's cleaned or as far as we can go, after with the city of Yamhill.
I just
Okay.
wanted, maybe
Yeah.
Christian, if you could wrap this up in terms of what you see in terms of, coming from your perspective,
Yeah.
the best way for us to propose this, to word this, and to make sure that we've got those considerations that you brought up addressed.
Yeah, I mean, we talked a little bit about how we've sold some other foreclosed properties to municipalities before. The purchase price was based on the outstanding amount of taxes and interest that the previous owner would have been required to pay had they come into the assessor's office on the last day of the redemption period and redeemed the property. So that's sort of the baseline starting point that we've used historically to determine what the sale price would be of these properties. We've also talked about the fact that this is, for a variety of reasons, not a unique piece of property, given the cleanup challenges, given some of the other costs and expenses around this property. The board is certainly not bound to use that pricing mechanism. That's what we've done in the past, but the board could set the price at a different level if you were so inclined. I've asked the assessor's office for an update on what that amount would be. It's been so long since I've asked for that number. I'm getting an update to make sure we've got solid information going forward. So that would be one way to, for example, price it in a purchase and sale agreement. One of the conditions being that before the transaction closed, the cleanup would be close to completed or completed, and we would have DEQ sign off on the cleanup plan. We can decide what level of documentation would be sufficient in order to close, if we would wait for the no further action letter, or if we just had a sign off by the project manager DEQ that the cleanup was complete. That would be certainly one way to approach it. That might give the city some time, 6, 8, 12 months, to pursue some of the funding that sounds like they're looking to find to help purchase the property. And I think if we've cleaned it up, and at that point, if the city is prepared to go forward, then go ahead and just complete the transfer. Then I think that would take care of issues on our end.
Yeah, to me, the consideration is that, again, the taxpayers be made whole.
Right.
That those taxes be, sent out to the various taxing districts, that your office be made reasonably whole, because this was a multi-year process and it
Sure.
cost a lot of money. And that the city of Yamhill gets to actually, it's a game changer for that city. And it could really be significant for their downtown area.
Yeah.
So those are the three things that are important to me.
And I'm thinking as we're talking too, we could easily put in the contract some conditions around providing access to the city immediately to do some of the winterization and water intrusion, road and
Right.
remediation, to give them the ability to start
To be
accessing the
proactive
property
about
and
that.
protecting it.
Yeah.
I think we could easily work that in to the agreement as well. And then I don't know what the city's thoughts are or plans might be for the small residents on the back half of the lot. I know there's some deferred maintenance on that property, which needs to be done if the plan would be to preserve it. If not, then
My understanding is the plan is to raise that structure. It's not functionally habitable, and the cost to get it habitable exceeds, all logic.
yeah.
But it would make a nice parking lot, is what I heard.
Yes, it'll probably be used for some function at some point, but yeah, it's not a keeper.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, I don't know if Philip has thoughts on that, but that's how I would suggest we move forward. Is we can work up a purchase and sale agreement and put the necessary conditions in, discuss the costs and the timeframes, and working with Mary in terms of getting the wheels rolling on applying for the funding and hopefully securing that and give ourselves enough time to complete the process. But I would think by spring, early summer.
Mhm.
I don't know if that's a timeline that works for the city.
Yeah, my only concern in all of that would be just knowing the timelines that it takes to get to contractual agreement is, we've got 60 days of water pouring down on the property from the sky. So,
You mean in terms of getting to the point where the city of Yamhill has the authority and permission
Yeah,
to
so
access the site?
right, so if maybe we did something, ahead of the curve, that like, so first priority is giving the city of Yamhill's, maintenance department keys, access, insurance, coverage, that sort of thing, to get the property basically buttoned up so that it's safe from the elements.
Before a purchase agreement.
Yeah, and then we can go back and then figure everything out. And then, if for some reason we never came to an agreement, then obviously the preservation is on the city of Yamhill,
Yeah.
no harm, no foul. But preservation is, I think, first and foremost, the number one thing, is protecting the asset's condition.
Mhm.
And then we can, sit around and figure out, what the terms of the contract look like. But nothing Christian said, I think, is going to be offensive or we're going to take umbrage with it.
I mean, we could do an access agreement. Absolutely. That's not a problem.
Yeah.
We could get that done quickly.
So what's the liability then if we've had issues like this in the past with access to properties that we are liable for, and yet, so how does that work?
Well, I mean, we would remain in the chain of liability for anything that wasn't caused by the city's access to and use of the property. We would expect that the city would take responsibility for any liability that arose from their access to and use of the property. We've talked in the past about whether or not to put up some sort of temporary
Right.
security fencing
Mhm.
around it. I know that had been something that we chatted about with Mary earlier this year. Certainly when we get to the point of actually starting to do some of the cleanup and when we're starting to dig holes in the ground, we're going to want to consider that. It may be something that the city would be, if we can talk with them about what their thoughts would be around security as well, but that's certainly all something we can do to try to both limit
Yeah.
any additional liability that's incurred given their activities and then preserving reducing our risk as well.
Yeah, and I would say, entering into an access agreement with the city of Yamhill is actually probably much more protective for the county at this point, short of fencing off the property, because the property is widely used by the citizenry of the town. And
Whenever
so,
I drive through, there's like
right,
a
so
car
the-
for sale.
Right, so the county
Yeah.
actually has direct liability now, so the city would just be able to step in and sort of be the buffer between that,
Mhm.
and it's across from the police station and, across from City Hall, and you've got a much more watchful eye on it, as well as the city's insurance buffering here. So I think that, it would mitigate your liability more so than it exists now.
Okay,
I agree.
yeah,
Yeah.
I think so.
So communicate with DEQ about
Yeah, we'll start that
Clean it.
conversation
Funding
again.
and-
Mary, thank you.
project.
Yeah.
Right of entry agreement, for lack of a better term, since that's what's rolling off my tongue these days for some reason. And then while doing that, also beginning work on the sale agreement.
And I believe, Casey, in this case, Christian, we have to have a vote on it just to have you guys move ahead, or can we just do it by consensus?
Yeah, what I think is we've got direction today. We don't need to take any formal action. We'd bring the access agreement back to the board for consideration. We could possibly have that next week.
How about as far as working with having DEQ do the project management?
Well, that would
We
be
would-
part of an agreement.
I think we'd have an agreement with
You bring
DEQ.
back-
That we
bring
would,
back.
yes.
Yeah, that'll all come back before the board and the purchase and sale agreement would come back. And we have a couple of other procedural steps where the board would probably want to declare it surplus once again and then authorize the sale to the city when we're ready for that. But
Because
yeah,
I'll tell you,
those would all come back to the board again.
I have tended to fill and vet the new mayor and everything, because they're definitely, like Phil said, it's like a new generation. They're coming out of the, I don't want to say dark ages, but yeah, the way they're approaching with the downtown association group and everything, that Yamhill, I think, is this piece of property is going to be key to the development of all of downtown Yamhill. From an economic development standpoint, I think that's part of our responsibility, to pump more business into the small cities, and I think that's what we're doing.
Yeah, huge.
Great. Well, thank you. Then, thank you. Oh, it looks like Mary's gone, but thanks, Mary. And thank you, Philip, for coming on behalf of
Thank
the
you,
city.
Philip.
Yeah, and you'll hear more from Christine, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
we'll be in touch.
Thanks a
Thanks,
lot.
Phil.
Yeah, you bet.
Thank you.
All right. Well, we will move on to item E2, which is a review and discussion of the Association of Oregon Counties dues structure. And I think Commissioner Exter is going to start us off, but Commissioner Olson, you've also been very active in it.
And I'll let Commissioner Starrett start us off.
So Commissioner Morhurst has sent a couple of due structures in terms of a memo that came out. And there are a number of different options. And before we get into those specifically, I think I would like to defer to Commissioner Olson, who's been really instrumental in the whole budgeting process and the whole conversation. So maybe we could start there.
Sure, I guess a couple of my feelings about it is I go back to the fact that what kind of due structure we use is critical, because the counties that don't pay some of the voluntary dues or don't belong to those like veterans that don't use that, they end up using it just as much as we do. And that's the one thing about the voluntary fees, other than I think federal lands, which there's not a lot of counties that have federal lands, is that if they're gonna use the service, they should all pay for the service. Now, whether that, we roll that somehow into a standard dues fee, but I think what really, the question that really needs to be set with all the counties, and I keep hearing this also, well, we can't raise the dues or we can't change the dues because then we might lose somebody like Multnomah County or Washington County. Well, to me, that's all the wrong reason whether we raise the dues or not. Because we're not there to service Multnomah County and service Washington County. We're there to service the whole state of Oregon, including them, but the whole state of Oregon. If we were to go anyway, I would go for a fixed dues, but I'm not so sure yet this year, being that Dr. Nichols is just in and we've got a whole new legislative staff. I would not be for this coming year of raising the dues at all this coming year. I don't think the proof is in the pudding yet that we're doing everything we should be doing so the members get their full benefits out of it. But I don't like the volunteer, and I let Lyle there know this, or Commissioner Morhorst. I don't like the individual, even though it makes sense to have specialty dues, I don't like the fact that you have specialty dues when counties that don't pay those dues take advantage of that service. Anyway, and how you keep counties from not taking advantage of that service if they don't pay those dues, I don't know, because we're all one county, but I think my opinion is a dues increase going to be required? I think, yes, a dues request is going to be required. The percentage, looking at what what Commissioner Warhorse submitted and everything, I'm not so sure the percentages of how we base that amount. But dues-wise, serving on the dues committee, there's a lot of different ways of structuring dues to support our budget, but there's a lot of other ways I think we could support our budget with some of the programs we don't really need to do instead of raising dues. Like, I love the conference, right? But and a lot of it's paid for by vendors and everything. But AOC dumps a lot of money into the conference. Do we really need to have a full-blown 4-day conference? I realize our partners such as the assessors, the administrators and everything get together during that conference and have theirs. But do we really need those kind of expenses? And the other fact is, I'm not so sure we're better off owning and managing the building we're in, because I don't think the other organizations, the school districts and the Oregon cities, I don't think they're paying their fair share either. So.
Is that something we could find out? Is that something?
I think, we can ask and find out of how the cost for that building is allocated and what, as one of the owners, what our requirements are. I know we get some free internet services from LOC, but then we give them quite a few free services back with the roads and stuff like that. So, but I think that breakdown, and is it something that we're better off not being an owner of the building? And I don't know any of the tax implications, or we're not being a better owner, or we're not one of the three primary owners. So, because I don't know what, if LOC put to function, that's a whole nother story, because what happens to their share of the building? Where does that come from? And so but anyway, my thing is, yes, I do think there's a required dues increase. I do think it should be across the board for everybody, and we should have voluntary dues, especially if people can take advantage of those programs and they don't pay the dues for those programs. But I also think we can wait a year to do that, to do the dues increase.
Okay,
So that's my feeling, Mary.
great, thank you.
I really appreciate the work that you've done, Budget Committee, and you've been looking at this. We've had that problem since 2018 and that $160,000 a year deficit. So there's no question about the fact that the agency has really struggled. And I think a lot of that, there's no point in talking about it. A lot of it was some malfeasance that really went on for a really long time. That was
Years.
it was no, really kind of inexcusable, but it doesn't matter how the donkey got in the ditch. We have to get the donkey out. My question is one of the proposals is to do this by population. And we know that in the past that the larger population counties like Multnomah County, Washington County, and Clackamas County have been paying more freight, and they pay a significant amount of dues, which has made it difficult policy-wise, because we were always afraid of offending those counties, that they might take their marbles and go home. And so that made us, there were some concerns about, issues that were whether AOC was going to take a position on cap and trade. So we knew that we couldn't go there because we knew that Multnomah, Clackamas, and Washington were likely to be at odds with the smaller counties or the frontier counties. So I think that when you have that kind of a due structure, it makes it inequitable. I think we almost need kind of an electoral college approach to AOC. But I do have a couple of concerns. Number one, when you look at the structure of those dues increases, let's just say at the end of the day, Yamhill County is paying $40,000 a year. Are we getting $40,000 worth of benefit? In the past, initially, when I became a commissioner, I started to look at the due structure and what we were paying for specifically. And there were a couple of those different committees and different dues that I thought, do we really need to be paying those? And we looked at those and we removed them from what we paid. But then ultimately, when we looked at what it was going to mean, we wound up adding a couple of those back.
Yeah.
So I'm in favor of looking at what it is, sort of like a la carte, what it is that we're accessing, whether or not it makes sense. But I'm asking the question more of a the question is AOC even relevant anymore? When you have counties that are their policies and their philosophies are in direct opposition to what other counties might be wanting or proposing, how do you manage that? How do you have one agency that's supposed to lobby for a variety of different political ideologies?
Well, I think, Mary, you bring up a good point, and I'd just like to add to that, we talk about Washington and Clackamas and Multnomah County a lot, but yet on the other side, which concerns me more, is the Eastern Oregon County Association is becoming much, much more active, because they feel anybody, the counties, they're not getting their fair share because the counties west of the Cascades are getting their share. So, I would not be a bit surprised if someday, if the Eastern Oregon counties, as that organization goes longer, that they pull out of AOC, because they're not really meeting the needs, and they can't afford to do AOC, because they're definitely not getting. I mean, we get funding, but not much. But I still believe we're all paying homage to Multnomah and Washington County. I like the idea of kind of electoral college thing. But the fact that it is, if AOC comes out against something that's really against what Multnomah County wants to see, chances are Multnomah County would pull out, because they certainly don't need AOC.
Exactly.
So, I think we need it, the counties like Yamhill, Polk, Marion, we need AOC, but we don't need it to the extent that Eastern Oregon, and yet Portland doesn't need it to the extent we do. So I'd have to agree that if something isn't done, that I think in 2 to 3 years, AOC will have lost their significance. They won't be significant. Now, from a transportation standpoint, and I look at Yamhill County from a transportation standpoint, we belong to MWAC, which is very important. We always send our own people, whether it's a commissioner and like Dave Hogberger back to Washington DC, to deal directly with federal highways and Build America and deal with our congressional delegation back there. AOC doesn't really do that for us. We do that. So I have to agree that I think in 2 years the relevance may not be there. So.
And some of the larger counties also have their own lobbyists or government relations staffers, I should say. So that's part of the maybe not needing the influence that AOC brings.
But irregardless, I think personally, irregardless, that this year is not a time to add additional dues this year, because I want to see more how this is all going to play out. Because I think if we add more dues, what's going to happen is we're just going to convince a lot more counties, like Eastern Oregon counties, to drop out. So,
Right, they are presumably, I don't know the due structure of the EOC,
Eastern Oregon counties.
Yeah, it's EOC. I thought it was EOCC, but I don't know what the last seat would be. But presumably they're paying them twice, right? They're paying AOC dues and EOC.
I appreciate that, the way it's being presented to us is we have to do this now. And we have to come up with a dues increase now. But I like the not so fast. We've seen a lot of movement in terms of the heads of those subcommittees. And we've seen, I think the effectiveness has been kind of diminished, because we used to have some pretty powerful subcommittees that it seemed like we were getting stuff done. Now we're seeing that, again, there's that rural-urban divide that puts us at odds. So I think that maybe saying right now, we're not in favor of a dues increase. I mean, perhaps we'll pay this year's what we're paying now.
Right.
And then we need to really reassess whether we want to be part of this, because I'm really on the fence. And I know one of the considerations we have is that in order to access CIS insurance, we have to be part of the club. And we're not self-insured like some other counties are. So we couldn't afford to do that. So we have to basically sort of suck it up and pay the dues in order to have that insurance coverage. Ken, did you want to, I asked, do we have to play ball to get CIS insurance? And the answer is yes.
Yes, and it's part of the requirements in the bylaws to be a CIS member, because CIS was born out of a partnership between cities and AOC. It provided that insurance availability for those types of jurisdictions. The bylaw said in order to be a participant or a member of CIS, you have to be a member of
One of those.
AOC or the city of League of Oregon City. So,
Yeah, and I think, Ken, you make a good point. The point of that is if, like LOC ceases to exist someday, or we cease to exist, the other automatically loses their coverage because there's no more agreement with CIS, because it says you have to, both AOC and LOC have to be members. And if one isn't a member anymore, then the other doesn't get CIS.
That's-
yeah,
yeah, it's
as
good
an
way.
example, because like Jackson County, who had opted out of AOC a couple of years ago, and then came back, but they're self-insured.
Right.
So they're not part of CIS, they're self-insured, so then they don't have that insurance requirement, unlike we have that connection for our property liability. CIS is a major part of our insurance portfolio.
And we couldn't afford to self-insure.
No, because we went through the exercise several years ago with our broker and the actuarial study that we've done, and based on the amount we have to set aside, even more funds in the budget in order to entertain or even shift going towards self-insurance.
Yeah.
And then, again, with the additional costs of purchasing umbrella coverage, because what you do is you have so much funds available in reserve to cover any claims up to a certain amount, and then you purchase an umbrella coverage for any claims over that amount. And it just doesn't pencil out compared to what we're currently paying for and getting right now with our CIS. It's substantially more cost effective to be with CIS than it would be at this point.
And if we weren't with AOC, let's say if we weren't with AOC, it would even be cost prohibitive. We took the money we'd save from AOC and be self-insured and still leave us short.
Yeah.
Not even
membership
close.
dues
Yeah.
Compared
Not
to the
even
insurance
close.
requirement.
Yeah.
Yeah, a relative, drop in the bucket.
And that could be a decision. Are we with if we're with AOC strictly to get, strictly get that CIS coverage? And even if there were dues increases, can we just take them because it makes so much difference on our insurance? If the commission goes into that knowing that the reason we're in AOC is, there's a lot of reasons, but the main reason is for insurance coverage, because we get that insurance coverage.
Mhm.
And if we dropped out of AOC, we wouldn't get that insurance coverage. Is that itself enough to pay our dues and pay? It's
Right.
just the savings on insurance.
Well, it's not even close. When you look at that 40-something thousand dollars,
Mhm.
it's not even close because we did pencil it out when we were actually faced with that potential.
Yeah.
And it's massive.
Yeah, it is.
So maybe we're better off, I think, Mary, just saying, this year that, we'll pay our dues this year. But then in the next years, we're going to do some heavy evaluation, whether we want to do it. If it comes down to just an insurance standpoint, then I think a lot of these other things don't make a lot of difference.
Right,
Right.
you're right.
Right. I know that sounds like a funny thing.
If they want a
but-
5% increase, but we still save massive amounts on insurance.
Well,
Ken
the
wants to
other
say
thing is looking at the dues options that were presented, there's some confusion on my part, and I'm also trying to look at it, and it's something that, the administrators group is also starting to talk about, because we have some questions about the formulas and what's being proposed. We're still really early, and I assume that when we have our business meeting in November, this will be one of the topics points of discussion. But, it does seem to be some confusion, and I admittedly, I didn't have a lot of time to dig deeper into this, but I'm also seeing that, it seems like there was a pretty significant rate change for us. In fact, if you look at the options and what was shared, I think we're like number 3 or number 4 as far as the increase that's being applied to what we've paid in the previous year. And I'm not sure what the background is on it, on the rate determination on how they're shifting us from from where it was like 29 cents per person to 40 cents per person, and what that aligns to. So I have some questions about some of the background with this, and I'm also still looking at this, at what we paid the previous year.
Yeah.
I don't know if some of it's just taking into account that there was voluntary programs that we had elected not to participate in previous years, or what the background is on that number, but we pretty much participated in most. Of the
That's why I was-
voluntary, not all
yeah.
of the voluntary.
Yeah, we have, but there's counties that have taken advantage of what we have.
Well, one of the things that I was questioning was the sort of the line item for video lottery and for all of that. And we really looked at each one of those programs and wondered whether or not we needed to be involved. And you've got a separate charge for federal lands, for council forest trust lands. I believe there's a separate surcharge in order to be a voting member. And then we decided, we'd go ahead and pay it. And we always had a representative there. So I think really what it comes down to is just letting AOC know. I'm sure a lot of other counties are looking at this new structure saying, wait a second, especially in light of the fact that we don't know what our revenue shortfalls could potentially be. So maybe we go back to AOC and say, something's got to give here. You know, it's pretty lean in terms of how they're operating with staff.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean, you know, like the building. I mean, that is a state-of-the-art building, which is, I'm sure, very expensive. The conference itself used to be this really, I mean, it used to be really well done, and there was a lot of good information. But I think as the years went on, you'd go to these things and it didn't really seem like it was kind of worth going down there, spending the money, and the county spend the money on hotel rooms and meals and things like that. So I don't know. I think the jury's still out on AOC.
Well, and that's why I think like the conference, you know, I approach conferences, right? You know, there's usually, like, looking at, of course, certain, along certain tracks. But the fact about it is where I personally get the most out of the conference is probably where a lot of people get most. It's the time you're not in a class that you're talking to commissioners that are representing counties like you do. I think that's where the conversation really has. So I'm not so sure a 4-day conference is needed. I think that it still is out on AOC. I always go back to, if you look at what Marion, Polk, and Yamhill counties are in the regional solutions, if there was an association that the real rural counties, being that we're still considered a rural county, us, Polk County, Marion County, Benton County, you know, Lynn County, that we all had our own organization. We might not have all the lobbying expense there. I think there's more to say for something like that than there is to now AOC and trying to put everyone. And then we've always prided ourselves of we're the only state that has every county in the state in the association, you know, and we're the only county in the United States that has every one of their counties belonging to NACO, and that's just like, why? I don't understand. I go to a lot of these NACO conference calls and everything. I get more out of some of the NACO, like the Healthy County and Transportation conference calls. I get much more out of those than I get out of our AOC calls, so. Because they're on the federal level, you know, and there's a lot of other rural counties in America that are in the same place we are, so. But I'd be all for, you know, paying our dues as they sat this year and saying that over the next year, we're going to be going through a heavy evaluation of what is the financial value, not just the value, the financial value of one AOC.
And then don't let anybody AOC watch the video of our meeting where we talked about how it's so important to stay in there because of CIS.
Well, I think
You know what I mean?
they probably already know that.
I think they provide a lot of good things. And Rob Bovett does a great job.
He does.
Yeah. But some of these new, I'd say all the new lobbyists that they've hired for this legislative session don't know anything about them, you know, if they're going to be around, if they're not going to be around, so.
We have a lot of coastal former legislative aides at AOC now.
Well, that's why.
I was like, oh, these are coastal. I know these people from coastal
You talk
legislators.
about Eastern Oregon counties, it's no different than the coastal caucus. All coastal counties that have same things in common.
That's right.
Yeah,
That's
that's
right.
right.
Okay,
What do you think, Commissioner?
yeah, Casey.
I appreciate the idea of paying now and being like, we essentially holding the, like, let's continue to look at expenses so that we don't see dues increases all the time. That if something is unsustainable, that we look at where we can change things. So like the conference, like the building. I think it's totally reasonable while still acknowledging that it's important for us to be in AOC for many reasons, including the insurance.
Right. Yeah. I mean, listen, I think it makes sense for us to have an organization that lobbies for us. You know, but are they lobbying for us?
Right. And there are some things that are very, very, very important. I know. I mean, the roads program is so helpful, and how to separate out our own membership with the roads would be, I think, a mess. But I know the value of it just from having them holding onto the data from our pavement management program.
And that's something
Tremendous.
if they went away, that we have to be changed somehow.
Yeah.
We have somebody that tracks it, or we each have our own databases. So.
But admittedly, I do want to make sure that when the name AOC, when AOC supports something, that still holds value,
Mhm.
that that it holds currency in the state,
Right.
which I think is the danger when you have regional
Mhm.
groupings that are also weighing in with their own voices.
But then you have AOC saying we're not going to take a position on
Yeah.
so many things. It's like, okay, well, what are you going to take a position on?
Yeah.
That's right.
I mean, it's definitely, we saw with the AOC support of the Project Turnkey, where some commissioners didn't support it, and so they didn't sign on, but there was still a unified, there was still a lot of commissioners and a lot of voices that said, we still acknowledge that homelessness is important and we'd like to see the legislature act on it. And so even though it was like, maybe, not everybody supporting that particular thing, we still had the AOC leading the voice of saying this is important, even if this particular thing wasn't.
Right.
So they took a stand.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I would suggest then that we do a letter
Mhm.
saying, well, we're gonna pay this year's dues, but in the next year, and we value AOC.
Mhm.
And in the next year, we're gonna be doing kind of a deep dive into the offerings and services that AOC provides without taking away the fact that we value AOC services.
That was great, Commissioner.
All right.
So who is, you gonna do the letter, Casey, as chair?
Maybe what we could do is, I'm wondering if it should come from the administrator or should it come from the board? Or should it be an email in response to Commissioner Morhurst, who sent out these proposals?
Right.
And then we send one, I can send one back to him that says, we've looked at these and right now the consensus of the board is we'd like to,
Right.
hold steady on the dues increases while we reassess and have further discussion on AOC.
I think that's probably the best process.
I think so,
approach.
respond to the email.
Yeah.
And because I would venture, the one person at AOC that I've commissioner too, that I've been involved in a lot of organizations, we've been belong to, whether it be Centcor or Willamette Workforce Partnership, AOC, but I think Commissioner Pope would have a big, because I listen to Craig a lot, and I think Commissioner Pope's feeling would be the counties are being charged too much to pay those additional. These are breakout ones, why we reserve. When it comes talking about financial issues, you know how Craig is.
He's amazing. He
Commissioner
really
Pope
is.
just amazing, so.
Okay, well,
Okay.
if that's okay, I can send.
Yes, please.
And copy you on
Yeah.
the email to Commissioner Morhurst.
And I think if I remember correctly, I believe this is coming forward for the November general meeting,
Yes.
for consideration, then for action, during that week.
Yeah,
don't
I believe so.
remember off the top of my head, the actual agenda. And I haven't talked to the administrators group about this in detail to see if that group is necessarily going to, as president of the administrators, at least until November.
Yep.
We haven't had lengthy discussions or taken a position on it.
Okay.
We'll do that. What comes out of our business meeting.
That sounds great. Thank you, Mary, for
Thank
Commissioner.
Thank you.
Commissioner.
Thank you, Mary Camarata from
So
DEQ.
many Marys.
Commissioner Sarah, thank you for bringing it up, and then thank you for replying to Lyle.
Sure.
Commissioner Morhurst.
Yeah.
Of course, come January, whatever you guys say, I say, I had nothing to do with it.
Except that when you disagree, you'll send a letter to the editor as well.
Oh, yeah, of course.
Yeah.
And call us.
Any kind of
Oh,
person.
yes. Change my
It's what
phone
I'll
number.
call you, it'll make a difference.
All right, well, I will close the work session on AOC dues structure, and we'll move on to item F, which is department updates. And FA is facilities with Joe Moore. And welcome.
Gonna stay.
Been a while.
Yes.
I kind of wrote down kind of some of the stuff we've been doing since the last time we've been in here. I think, and most of you, I think, have been out to the new EM building.
We
And
have-
seen kind of what we've done out there as far as moving Brian and his staff out there and kind of put lipstick on that out there, make it look a little better.
Looks great.
Looks very
He
good.
seems to be very happy with it, so that was a pretty good project that we, just 90% of it we did in-house.
Yeah.
So that went over pretty good. Recently,
If I may, Joe, it was a little more than just lipstick. It was total makeover on that,
Yeah.
on that portion of the building.
Thank you. We actually all knew what he meant, but thank you.
We took him for being a rural Yam, so.
it was a little bit of a project.
It's remarkably different.
Yeah, it's
Yes.
nice. Just in time too.
And you know what I found amazing was being that our space needs and building needs analysis. So that was one of the better buildings.
Oh, yeah,
Really?
great.
That we had. It was one of our top 2 or 3 buildings.
Yeah.
And then thinking, well, gee, I guess it was worth putting money into
Yeah,
that.
kind of rated it fair.
Yeah. That's right.
And having it next to,
That's relative.
I think having it next to Public Works too is just an
Well, that's
idea.
a credit to our staff. I mean, they did a lot, they did the work and they did a good job with it. They took pride in what they were doing.
Yeah.
So, yeah, they did a really good job. I think most of you have probably seen what we've done over at the breakout expense house as well, as far as doing the foyer there for accounting, trying to meet some of the COVID regulations and not make it look real tacky. You know, so I think we're able to do that and make it look like it belongs there.
That house wasn't on the historical registry.
It is, what we did is not a permanent thing. There's
Not a
no
permanent thing,
structural,
Because we didn't do anything on the outside.
No, in fact, everything we did in there can easily be taken out. Yeah, so that was just basically to try to meet all the COVID benchmarks that they were giving us. We did the same thing for juvenile downstairs here where probation's at. We redid their window where they meet with the public. So it made it look nice, plus it gives them that barrier.
Yeah.
We've done different plexiglass separations between individual employees. And a good example is what we did over here in the assessor's office.
Yeah.
They seem to be pretty happy with what we did. Anyway, we kind of just try to keep up on all that stuff as it comes down and in ordering up supplies and trying to stay ahead of what people's needs are as you know, it's ever changing. Night shift. Part of this started off as a COVID request. I had one of my employees that, was having to take some time off and do the logistics family-wise. And he came to me and said, well, what are the odds of being able to work an evening shift? It would be beneficial to the county, it was beneficial to him, so I agreed to it. We at one time had this position many years ago. These kind of went away over the years. So went ahead and agreed to it, let him do this. I've added a second person to that shift. So we have 2 people working kind of a swing shift now. The benefit to the county on this is it allows us to get into places and do projects that during the day we can't do. Carpets is a great example. We need to get in and clean carpet, which otherwise it'd have to be done on a weekend or something like that. So it's working out good, and I think we'll keep that shift. I think that will be something that will stay with us. Right now, we're starting to concentrate a lot of seasonal concerns. Going into the winter months, as you can see, the trees are shedding their leaves everywhere. Try to keep all that cleaned up, try to keep the entryways clear, slip hazards, things like that. And I'm concentrating in that area. That's about it. Other than our daily, everyday things that we're constantly doing. We're trying to add in projects that benefit everybody that ask for them.
Well, Joe, from my perspective, you have been doing an amazing job of keeping up with all the code requirements. That's the thing that's most noticeable to me personally, besides the big remodel.
And one of the things we should add to that with the COVID stuff is we've taken on that electrostatic spraying for all of our buildings, on a nightly basis, trying to, we've been doing that for a couple months.
Yeah.
Several.
Trying to just, anything we can do that would try to mitigate any risks that we have.
Yeah, and I just wanted to further, because Joe will be humble about it, but Joe's done and his staff have done an outstanding job, and they've really been truly on the forefront in a lot of, whether it's arranging, because we still have the janitorial contractor who's still providing that service. We've supplemented it with our own in-house services. As far as responding to department head requests, trying to get our offices, like Joe was highlighting, with COVID mitigating measures, making sure that we have all the things in place to comply with the requirements and guidelines that have come down since March, which has evolved quite a bit, and it seems to be changing, weekly. So his staff has done a really nice job with that. And then I know it seems like it was months ago, but it really wasn't that long ago. But with the wildfires, while Joe was doing his part, he was actually out on one of the fires, but his staff at the same time really did a nice job, and I called on them a lot with the HVAC systems, the smoke events, and the response, and working on that. And their staff did again, they really stepped up and did an outstanding job. And I definitely have the facilities. I think a lot of times people see our facilities division and the work they do, and they see them coming and going and taking care of the place. I don't think they get the level of recognition that they probably should, and I just want to take this moment.
Just one thing I'll say too is, I've always taken the attitude that how good a manager or a leader is, that if they can get sick or they're gone for an extended period of time or off on vacation, that nothing changes. Everything just keeps moving on. And I think that what Joe has built into his staff, and that kind of attitude that he's built into his staff, I've seen in the 4 years I've been here, such a difference over the last years of our facilities department. And I know if I was running a company, I'd hire our whole facilities department, including Joe, of course.
Absolutely.
But Joe, your staff and you both do a great job.
Yeah, they do. They're wonderful. They're wonderful to work with, and they're doing a great job. And also, just to echo what Ken said about you going out and fighting fires, I don't think too many people know that you were right there talk about the front lines. You were right there and saw some of the devastation where towns were completely gone. And you have some stories about, people who've lost everything, and the fact that you went and did that and nobody even knew about it. So thanks for that too.
Anything else?
But no questions.
No question.
Thank you very much.
Thanks
Joe.
a
If
lot.
you have any questions, we'll go to your staff. They do something.
Oh yeah, there's always the hot water issue in the Fenton house. We could
Oh, yeah.
use some hot water over there.
You might not like me after
Oh my gosh.
Thanks, Joe.
And then we will move on. Thank you very much, Joe, to Fair with Gary Wirtz, Fair Manager. And thank you for your patience, Gary. Welcome.
Gets me out of leaf collection. Well, since I was here last, we've had a few more events happening. Things are starting to pick up a little bit, not to the level I want it to be, but of course with everything going on. So we've had some smaller horse shows coming in because of the size. Ability to have how many people there in the building. Of course, the biggest event you all know about is what we had going on out there during the fires. And a few things I just wanted to bring up that a lot of people don't know that, we had 220 horses out there of varying size, everything from a mini horse to a percheron, which are huge logging horses. And we had 510 other species out there. Everything from Peruvian guinea pigs, which are that big, turtles to goats, sheep, the whole thing. It was really kind of overwhelming. We were not going to let anybody get by. I was a little worried about how am I going to make this happen with just 2 office girls and myself. And so we put out the call to our partners, 4-H and FFA. And my God, I had people from all over the county there helping set up pins and stuff like that. It's just like having a fair. It was really overwhelming, the response that we got. Just the people who signed in, we had 440 volunteers over the period out there. And some of them came 3 times a day to help take care of animals. A group that stayed at night to watch the animals and stuff, make sure there wasn't any problems. So I could get out of there at 3 o'clock in the morning instead of staying on.
Oh my goodness.
So it was just amazing, you know, what the community response was and what we were able to provide for people. I mean, we were providing services for at least 4 or 5 counties that people that came there. So, you know, a lot of it was people who had showed there as kids. I had one gentleman who showed there, he said, I showed here when I was 17 years old, he's 70 years old. And he brought just 22 horses that he had. So it was really kind of neat. We only had, out of all those animals, we only had lost one. And that had respiratory problems when it came to fairgrounds. And the owners were notified the whole time. They were in California and couldn't get back. A neighbor brought the horse to us, so we had a vet. We did discussions with them. But, you know, for 700 animals, only losing one with the conditions that we had, that was very, very good of us. What we were able to do, so I'm pretty proud of that. And what we were able to accomplish out there. In the community, then I eat better there than I do at home.
Yeah.
Because of the business, we're bringing, you know, meals for the volunteers. I mean, there wasn't a meal that we had to, I think I bought 1 round of pizzas and the rest of the businesses in town, restaurants all brought food and dropped it off and snacks and that type of stuff. I mean, we had probably 8 picnic tables, the seats and tops were just loaded with snacks and food. And water, I mean, 2 pallets of water for 2 different businesses here in town. So it was a pretty good deal. They all remembered where the fairgrounds is at, which is usual. You know, sometimes in the past, you kind of wonder.
Yep.
But they all remembered that. And I think, and I keep hearing from people all the time that send notes to the house, saying, if you need anything, let us know, because you helped us out. And we needed it. So
Bravo.
it was amazing when I started looking at the actual numbers. You know, the volunteer numbers is the one that shocked me the most. You know, because for years we struggled to get volunteers. Now I've got a volunteer force that wants to come back and help. So, you know, plan on the fair, most of them have already volunteered for fair. I'll have more people out there to put fair on than we've had in 30 years. So it's been kind of it was a good eye-opening experience for all of us. And the one thing that we're really proud of is that we didn't have everything that came in went back to its own home. I had the state vet calling us every day, wanting to know if we had any lost animals. We didn't. Everything that we had there, we knew where they came from and where they went back. So we were one of the very few that knew that. And that's all only because we decided early that we were just going to run it like we do fair. And just used our stuff that we used for fair, for stall cards and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So we knew the owners, we knew everything. So I'm pretty happy when the state vet called and said, you know, you're the only county that knew where every animal belonged, where every animal was going back. And then when they left, they had to check out. We had a process that we set up so no one could just come by, because one county did have that problem. And so the state vet wanted us to send what we had done so that they could come up with a protocol for the future. And this is unprecedented. You know, what happened. So right now we're working on a couple of different events. We're going to try to overland auction. We want to proceed with that with the minimal people there, but we're going to also take it virtual. And we have because I have a lot of people that have held on to their buggies and stuff that have said, well, you're having it next year, we'll hold on to it till next year, and bring it up. So I think we're going to go ahead and do that. We're going to go ahead and hold that auction and be a good income producer for the fairgrounds. The other thing that we're going to pick up is that we're going to do a tax sale. Tax sales, places that have them, pretty good income producers for that. So we're going to see that in the future that we're probably going to have to produce more events than we ever had to produce in the past. Just for the fact that a lot of groups have disbanded. But the need is out there, and I think the only way for our survival is to start producing some of these events and work on that. So otherwise, it's just keeping the facility looking like it's always looked, best we can. With the two office girls and myself, we've been able to keep up with everything. And that's about it. Nothing else. You have any questions?
Questions, comments?
No, I think my own comment is, since Gary took over as fair manager, I mean, Al did a good job, but since Gary took over, our facilities out there, the cleanliness of the fairgrounds, what he himself personally does out there, I think we have one of the, I don't know if I don't want to call it most affordable, but we have one of the best overall event centers out there when the new building's all walled up and totally done and everything. And I've said before, I look at us as not being a fairgrounds, but as a true event center with a fair just being an activity of the events center, because I think the county needs to start really looking at that like that is an event schedule, make it where people want to come there here for other events. I don't know how Gary would ever manage them before.
Well, I want to say thank you for, I saw, whenever I was out there, you were there. I know you hardly ever left. And the volunteers, the fact that you were able to keep everybody in line. And we heard the other night about the 4-H kids who were stepping up those kids are so impressive. But I think our community is too, as far as the number of people who volunteered. So thanks for being the foreman in that project. And it really was impressive.
Well, and instead of doing what I used to do for years is, oh, they can't do it right, I'll do it myself. If it's just too big. And I was able to get a core of people that could go out and do that. A lot of them 4-H people. And really, they're the ones that made it. I was the guy that came to if there was a question or needed, how do we do this? But they're the ones that actually did the job. I mean, that was the amazing part. Kids, families just showed up. It's not easy to set up pins, these pins that we have out there. And they had 30 people up there setting these pins up, and we had them done within a couple of hours. That was 500 pins.
Well, thank you.
So it was, like I said, that's why the other night, 4-H deal, I was really thanking all of them, because a lot of them were in the room at that night.
Yeah.
And took part of that. And one young lady that took over the small animals, who's at Oregon State right now, she was a real driving force, let me tell you.
Yeah.
So it was like that. I'm glad we were able to provide that for people.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I think that the 4-H folks were really grateful to have you as their leader. So, I mean, you're not their leader, but you were the one that everybody looked to. So it was very clear that they were grateful for the opportunity to work with you. Yeah.
Well, yeah, I really appreciate all the work. All those years I've been on the board and stuff, it was the first time I had received anything from 4-H.
Yeah.
I was really proud of that.
You should be.
Thank
If I may,
you. Yes.
before we let Gary step away, I just wanted quickly, Gary and I are trying to put together a meeting, and because I I think one thing that hasn't been said or what hasn't really been recognized is really the impact that the current pandemic in town with fairgrounds, because of course we didn't have a fair for this year. And I have concerns, you know, and I think we all do when we look at, as you know, the fairgrounds operates based on the revenues that they generate with the activities and events. And needless to say, we still have expenses, and Gary has been doing, you know, his best and doing a really nice job of trying to control those expenses, because yes, you don't have the expenses related to the events, but again, a lot of times you're collecting those revenues and you're operating the next event based on those revenues that you were in the previous. But I believe, because we don't have any general fund that's going to the fairgrounds right now, it's strictly revenues. Revenue replacement is not something that's eligible for CARES Act funds or anything like that, but I do think the board, once I'm able to meet with Gary and kind of look at the situation, I do think this is one of the programs that, whether it's something we're gonna need to do during this budget year to assist the fairgrounds in being able to navigate this pandemic and the loss of revenue that they're already seeing. Or also looking at, you know, I just, it kind of hits me right here, and I don't mean to put the board on the spot. I'm just gonna suddenly, I'm gonna throw an idea out here. And, you know, another thing to kind of recognize is, you know, the whole serving as an evacuation center for, you know, all these folks that we're bringing in, that's not something that we're likely going to get FEMA reimbursement
That's
or
correct.
any other fees coming into the fairgrounds for that. At the same time, you know, we as the county, you know, the fairgrounds doesn't have a lot of revenue that's coming in to support that type of activity. So I was just gonna throw out here and kind of, I haven't done any analysis or even looked at that, but looking at the event and the services that they were providing, and the fact that we were providing an emergency service, if that's something that we should be getting in contingency funds or something else to transfer to the fairgrounds to at least cover for those operations, that for the services that they were providing during the wildfire, to also further help offset, you know, the challenge that they're having, because here they were trying to keep that fairgrounds maintained, open, and prepared to accept all these evacuees, yet they're not having the revenues coming in with the shows and the fairgrounds and things like that. And I just wanted to put this, you know, idea out here for further discussion, and or at least have it on the board's radar, that once Gary and I are able to meet, sit down and look at the budget situation with the fairgrounds, that we could come forward and bring some proposals. But this was one, as it just hit me when I was sitting here, that it's a possible solution to help offset some of those operational costs. I know they got a lot of donations, they got a lot of support that was, you know, being offered to the fairgrounds to help with the evacuees, but it, you know, I still think there may be some gaps to addressing the staff time that the fairgrounds spend in working on this. And then also the impacts on the maintenance and operation of the facility itself that hasn't really been taken into account with this. So sorry, I didn't mean to put Gary on the spot or the board on the spot. It's not looking to take action, but I just wanted to put on the radar that I'd like to come back, Gary and I, to come back to the board and talk about some possible solutions.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, please get us more
Agreed. Yeah.
information.
Well, I
Okay,
appreciate
thank you.
that.
Thank you.
You know, one big things about it is that, you know, we have a 70-year-old facility out there. The majority of the buildings are, you know, 50 to 60 years old. So even if you were to, God forbid, shutter the fairground, you would have such a tremendous expense in reopening, because the buildings they fall apart whether you're there or not. And that's what we're keeping up on. That's the biggest thing. I mean, you know, and staff time. You know, during the pandemic, we had just about one of our board members who was a former commissioner about had a heart attack. Looked at the overtime bill and I said, I don't know how to count it.
Right.
So
Not literally.
This is all figurative.
she was having heart palpitations. And she understood, but when you're looking at, you know, when you're looking at what we're bringing in, what our expenses are, you know,
Absolutely. Thank you very
Yeah,
much.
thank you for bringing
Thanks,
it up.
Gary. Thank you.
And we will see you in a little bit. Thanks, Gary. Move on from department updates to G, which is consent agenda, and we have none today. Move on to item H, which is old business, and we have none today. And we move on to item I, which is other business. And item I1 is consideration of approval in the matter of a zone change from resource industrial to light industrial and the imposition of a limited use overlay for tax lot 5309-700, which is located at 14870 Wallace Road. It's planning docket Z-01-20. The applicant is Wilco Farmers, and we are considering declaring an emergency. And commissioners, do you have any? The planning commission has lots of conversation about this. Todd Sadlow provided us a really great memo.
You know, I don't have any questions at all. I think with what,
Commissioner, if I could
Yes.
suggest, I'm sorry to interrupt, but generally, since we're declaring an emergency, we would have both readings of the ordinance today. If I could suggest, in hearing no objection, we would read the ordinance by title only. And then after the first reading, if there was any additional discussion, deliberations the board wanted to have, you could have it then. And then we could call for the second reading and then the board could take action.
That sounds great to me, Christian. Thank you for that.
Yes, thank
Okay.
you.
In this case, then we'll proceed with the first reading of the ordinance. This is in the matter of a zone change from resource industrial to light industrial and imposition of a limited use overlay for tax lot 5309-700 located at 14870 Wallace Road, planning docket Z-01-20. The applicant is Wilco Farmers and declaring an emergency.
Great, thank you.
no, I guess
Any
my,
discussion?
yeah, I guess my only discussion is I think for that piece of property and for what's intended to be used for, it fits well in a rural, rezoning fit in a rural area.
Commissioner Shea, do you have anything you'd like to
I
add?
have nothing
I
to
mean,
add.
you
No,
did.
thank you.
I should add that since I will be planting hazelnuts on our farm this year, I would like to declare a potential conflict of interest since this is about 2 miles from our farm, and the activities will be the use and storage of hazelnut harvesting equipment. It's a long shot, but and the other thing I'd like to note though is that the property is being used right now. There was a note in the description that it's not being used, so I just wanted to acknowledge that an apiary does use it.
Does that count?
But the boxes are there, so they're using it as a storage area, or what do you call it? The spot where the hives live.
Active? Is
What
it
is it
active?
called? It's the bee home.
Yeah, it's called the Big Sting.
Totally.
Okay.
And since they're also our neighbors, I did want to acknowledge that the beekeepers are there. Okay, with that, I don't have any further discussion.
Okay, so call for the second reading.
Okay, call for the second reading, please.
All right, hearing no objection, the second reading will be by title only. This is in the matter of a zone change from resource industrial to light industrial and imposition of a limited use overlay for tax lot 5309-700 located at 14870 Wallace Road, planning docket Z-01-20. The applicant is Wilco Farmers and declaring an emergency. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. And we do need to vote on it still, yes. Okay,
I'll make a recommendation that we approve the zone change with planning docket Z-01-20.
great. All in favor signify by saying aye. Any opposed, same sign? The record show unanimous approval of item I1. And thank you, Christian, and thanks, Todd.
Thank you.
Item and thanks, Planning Commission. Item I2 is consideration of approval of an agreement between Yamhill County and SAR Enterprises Incorporated, DBA Communications Northwest, for radio system upgrades in the radio system upgrade services in the Yamhill County Correctional Facility in the not to exceed amount of $79,495, effective November 1st of 2020 through January 31st of 2021. And Commissioner Olson, do you have anything you'd like to add, or
No, I
Ken?
think this is just part of ensuring that our radio systems are kept up to date with the technology and that we don't fall very far behind in what's available to us.
Okay, great. It really isn't a facility thing, but sorry, Ken. Okay, great. Well, I would move approval then of item I2 unless there's further discussion.
So, yeah,
Yes.
because you made me a nominee.
Yes. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. The record show unanimous approval of item I2. Item I3 is consideration of approval of a grant application 20-536 between Yamhill County and the Oregon Office of Emergency Management for the 2020-2021 fiscal year in the amount of $92,269, effective July 1st, 2020 through June 30th of 2021, to supplement operational costs for emergency management. And I thought this was an acceptance, so forgive me if I was confused. But it's actually the application.
And the request was for 176,
Yeah.
and we wound up with 92,269.
And that's why I was confused, because I thought this was our accepting it stage.
So it's approval of the grant, not of the application.
Yeah, I guess that's what it would be then, is striking an application, right?
Right, and again, the portion of it, we didn't get the,
Yeah,
Right.
that's the only reason why I would have realized.
okay.
So grant is out.
And I would move approval.
Great. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. The record show unanimous approval of item I3. Thank you. Item I4 is consideration of approval of an agreement between Yamhill County Health and Human Services and the Yamhill Carlton School District to provide behavioral health counseling services for the 2020-2021 school year, not to exceed $116,463, retroactive to September 2020 through May 2021. And Commissioner Starrett, do you have anything you'd like to add?
Just that is an increase of a half of a position.
Yeah.
And I would move approval.
Great, thank you very much. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. The record show unanimous approval of item I4. Item I5 is consideration of approval of amendment number 1 to agreement number 160124 between Yamhill County Health and Human Services and the Oregon Health Authority, just board order 19-157, extending through September 29th of 2021 to support the outpatient medication assisted treatment program. And Commissioner Starrett, do you have anything you'd like to add? It was a good memo.
Yes, happy to see that. So I would move approval.
Great, thank you. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. The record show unanimous approval of item I5. Item I6 is consideration of approval of position management authority to add 0.75 FTE Human Services Specialist 3, which is a QMHP, to the Health and Human Services Family and Youth Division. And Commissioner Starrett or Ken, do you have anything you'd like to add?
Just an additional staff time for
Yep.
behavioral health counseling.
Great. Well, do you have anything you wanted to add? Okay. I would move approval then of item I6. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. The record show unanimous approval of item I6.
If I may, Chair, I
Yes.
just wanted to just clarify to make sure it's in the record that under number 4, where you see the not to exceed amount of the 116,463,
Mhm.
that includes an increase in the FTE. There was an increase in
Yes.
FTE, but that number that's there doesn't represent just the increase for the FTE. So that represents 2 FTEs for that contract.
Yes.
It's the
Yes.
whole thing.
That's a good,
Okay.
between all of us, we got it. Thank you. That's
Thank
a
you.
good clarification for the record. Yeah.
Yeah.
It wasn't just the,
Yes, no, this represents 2 FTE and we have increased it, but the 2 FTE is the total. Yes, thank you. All right, item I7 is consideration of the Yamhill County Rural Broadband Expansion Project funding request. And Commissioners, I apologize that we were a little bit late in getting it to you. I promised Avisha that once the project a document was ready to be had, that I would put it on the agenda. So apologies for it being a little late.
Thanks
She's
for
here with
waiting.
us to explain it, and it's in the packet. And before Kathy Tate arrived, I was explaining that I was glad that Commissioner Olson was here to explain IT stuff that I didn't know what it meant.
Translate for us.
Yes. Like, for example, densify. That was one that I was going to ask.
Fair enough. Thank you, Chair.
And
So welcome.
since he knows nothing, I can tell Kathy, I can tell him anything I want.
And I'll go, oh! But then I'll look to Commissioner Starrett, and if she's shaking her head and smiling, then I realize
You look at
that
her
he's,
about
that
technology.
he's full of it.
Well, I think that it's clear that you could say anything. It's like when Shane does an update from IT, I'm like, I
What?
don't know. I still can't get on Zoom.
Totally. Welcome,
Who's that,
Abhishek.
Michelle?
Yeah.
Thank you, Chair, Commissioners, and staff. We always appreciate having an opportunity to present. And as you mentioned, Kathy Tate is here representing Online Northwest. I was glad to know she returned earlier than I expected from her trip, so she was able to join us to provide clarity. I know that you did receive the proposal, so I won't read that word for word by any means. Nobody wants that. But I did want to share just kind of a reminder, bring us to an understanding of how we got to these proposals, if you will. So as you recall, a couple of months ago, I approached the board with a request for project prioritization to approach EDA funding. We call it the EDA list, but essentially it built a list of regional projects that we can put before potential funders. So being the state, local government, any other opportunities to pursue funding. Out of that list was a lot of different things, right? So some projects that were essentially already had some legs that we wanted to see continue to move forward, such as bypass, next phases of funding and construction. There were some projects that went to staff for follow-up. There were a couple of projects that it was asked that said for followed up on. We have been very closely following the state and federal progress around areas of focus and prioritization for COVID recovery, and also for developing resiliency for communities. I just attended an OEDA conference this week, which is Oregon Economic Development Association, so the Association of Economic Developers for our state and Southwest Washington. And we had speakers from all over the country talking about resiliency. And as we have been talking about pivoting and recovery, we need to keep in mind that resiliency is what helps protect us as we go into the next unknown, right? And whatever that is. And that could be earthquake preparedness, it could be a number of things. And the two topics, the two issues that kept being brought up in regards to recovery and resiliency were childcare and access to data through broadband internet expansion, especially in rural areas. So I was excited to be tasked with identifying some projects to bring before the board for consideration, for support, for partnership, for funding. These are also projects that we're seeking additional funding to support through the state and through the federal government. And this is one of them. So SEDCOR, as you know, works very hard to identify local businesses doing good things and to make sure that we're sharing out that good work. And as we started approaching projects that address these concerns that we have in our community, trying to find local business partners who are trying to create public-private partnerships to get that work done is one of our top priorities. And that's what brings us to this project that I bring before you today. So as you know, and I shared with you in the written proposal, Online Northwest has a very strong background in our county. They're the only commercial residential internet service provider who's headquartered in Yamhill County, and they have continued to grow over the years with an office here in McMinnville. They're a multi-county, multi-solution organization and still continue to commit a huge amount of resources to Yamhill County, which they call home. As I was communicating with service providers and with Kathy Tate directly about opportunities for expanding rural broadband, she presented me a project that without support of funding either through the county or through the state will not meet kind of the project prioritization for the next few years. So these sorts of rural broadband projects, we've talked about many times before, right? They absolutely need to have some sort of funding behind them. because the numbers do not pencil out for service providers to put in this really expensive network to densify the service and to get that middle mile equipment sort of work done for a very small number of homes. And at the same time, it's that very small number of homes that we are essentially desperate to expand service to, because our rural community continues to get left further and further behind, and especially as we are, shifting, if you will, to a reality of distance working and distance learning. We are aware that most large and medium-sized corporations are now exploring long-term distance working. And part of that is because we basically just had a huge test of whether or not that works. And businesses are not only finding that it works, but they're also finding that they can attract talent throughout the entire world, essentially, by offering distance work. And we want to be the county that attracts those people, those high-level employees, to live in our community, right? But they can't do that without access to the type of service that they would need in order to do those jobs. So access throughout the county to internet and data service is a really valuable thing for us to be looking at. So again, these are the sorts of projects that we have tried to pursue funding through the federal government multiple times, right? Looking at various different programs that they have for rural broadband expansion, and we don't qualify for those programs. I'm hoping that we see an opportunity to qualify for some of the EDA funding as I continue to work with Kathy and other service providers to identify opportunities to continue to do this good work in our region. But we do have an opportunity before us, and that's what we're asking you for today. So essentially today, I have shared with you that Online Northwest has already committed to some pretty essential costs associated with this program. They are working with SEDCOR and others to seek additional funding. They are coming in front of the board today with a request to support this project with $500,000 of what we believe is CARES Act reimbursable funding, which will allow them to initiate this project this year. Again, a project which otherwise would not be able to hit their priority list for probably several years, and it would still require funding to do that. And we have a commitment with Online Northwest to continue pursuing additional funding from the state and federal government. Again, Kathy is here to answer any additional questions that you may have. So please let me know if anything's gone unanswered.
Great. Thank you very much, Abhishek.
Sure.
Commissioners.
Well, I think Abhishek, very good presentation, and I'm sure Online Northwest can do a good job, and with the licenses they just got, which really impresses me, Kathy, because when the FCC started giving those out, they were a premium to come by, and the fact that you guys were able to acquire them really makes a big difference to this project or any broadband project, I think. I would like, we believe it's CARES Act and reimbursable. But I'd like to ask Ken if what his feeling is on, because it's always, you never know until they give it to you, about what your feeling is on the CARES Act.
Well, based on what the information that was provided, it does look like, if you're expanding broadband, it would fit into one of the general categories under CARES Act. My questions are going to be more centered around how is this in direct response to COVID or to build that what needs to be, because I have to, when the auditors knock on our door, I have to be able to respond to the audit on whether or not, well, it fit this general category, but I have to be able to justify that the amount was reimbursable because one was a direct COVID response, and I don't know if there's data available on how many households, if there's from a school district, and there's limitations for having, whether it's school students connecting because they're not able to do in-class learning, if we know any statistics around the number of households, public employees, or, or services that we're accessing. I think I'm gonna need some of that information just to make sure that, that when the treasury shows up or the state to audit this, that we're not, reimbursing the state or sending the check back because it was deemed not to be eligible for it. So, in order to do this, there's that. Then there's also, based on the amount, we're gonna have to have an agreement in place to release any of the fund. And then there's also gonna need to be, I have to look at the timing of how we handle, when was the expense? We got the expense because we're awarding the grant, what the timeline is for implementing or starting this work and what elements we're paying for. So I'm just gonna word out a lot of questions there. And I'm sorry, I'm the one who ranks on parades and chapter strings sometimes. And then the other part that we're gonna have to, and I just want to be prepared that the part 2 of the discussion is we need to talk about how much CARES Act funds we have already identified or earmarked for certain programs and how much is remaining and whether or not there's sufficient funding. And I have some information, but I'll save that and we'll come back to that.
Perfect.
So I'll address a couple of those questions. I know that Kathy has done some work working with the school districts to identify some areas of service, and that kind of is what begat some of these projects that we all had a chance to look at several months ago that were already engineered, that we were trying to put in front of EDA for funding. Any specific information, as Ken mentioned, which I don't believe that he's a dream killer. I believe that he's keeping us honest, right? We need to make sure we're providing the information.
Yep.
So this additional information around what other sort of public employees might be impacted and be able to benefit from distance learning. We could work with the county to make sure that we're pulling those numbers and bringing those in front of you. One of the reasons why we are approaching these requests as grant funds instead of contracts is in order to meet, in our opinion, how we have read and understood these, right, is to meet those requirements for how you disperse the fund. So the idea is that with the funding, Online Northwest would be able to begin these activities immediately. And with their investment that they're already in, it gives them the ability to do that. And several months ago, this wasn't a project in front of us, right? So they've been committing to this work while we've been trying to figure out how to support it, which is phenomenal. But instead of asking the county for a contract for service, we are asking the county for a business grant.
This is actually more similar to like the community request grants that will be before us. The application is open right now.
Right.
Yeah, but specifically for broadband expansion with the eligibility that's noted in here. Right. Okay.
I just had a question about the notation that the project would go forward with or without this funding.
So the way I want to make sure that I clearly express that is that in order for this project to go forward, they would still need some sort of funding. And if we don't receive funding now in order to move the project forward, it would still be on their list of projects, but we need to identify funding in order to kick it off. And that could take a couple of years to do.
Because I know there are other providers in other parts of the county that are giving local residents estimates of $300,000 just to get going, and then you're looking at $15,000 for each individual homeowner, and then $200 a month. So there's a significant. I know this because this is what's been proposed to us. So we know that there are lots of communities in our county that are not served by broadband, and that they are looking at their own initial outlay because they realize it's probably not a project that's going to get going. So I just want to make sure that we want to make sure that we're looking at these projects knowing that there are so many of them potentially. So how do we do that equitably? And then I see the $656,000 balance remaining. And where is that? Is that earmarked for any particular source?
So Online Northwest, and I'll get out of the way so Kathy can maybe answer some of those questions more specifically, but Online Northwest does have a program expansion budget So they're planning out many years in advance. And so Kathy has said that they will absolutely cover those costs moving forward with this project. Right, and so even we made a notation here that with a commitment from the county at $500,000, they can move this project forward. It would be more financially feasible if they could get additional funding from the state or the feds. But even if they do not secure that additional funding, a commitment from the county creates a commitment from Online Northwest to move forward and shoulder the rest of the cost.
And then I think that I want to make sure that Commissioner Sterrett's comment, but I think that Kathy will be able to, which is kind of, there are all these little pockets in the county that have incredibly high infrastructure costs. And I know, up Baker Creek, somebody said 100,000 for just extending something. And my understanding is that really the work that you're proposing is to cover a lot of those kind of all at once, but you're here, so we get to talk to you.
Yeah.
Thank you for having me here, and thanks to Abishai for
Can you-
doing a fantastic job of.
Can't understand you.
A little
Sorry.
closer
A little
to the
closer to the
microphone.
I'm sorry.
Kathy.
Should I take my mask off? or-
You can bring the microphone closer, or you
fine.
can take your mask off.
Sorry about that. So, so thanks to Abishai for working with me so thoroughly and diligently on trying to figure out this challenge that we have. I think that the idea is that there is a substantial amount of, the most substantial number of customers who are lacking service are in the hardest to reach places in the county. So we have this fantastic, beautiful countryside with lots of trees and rolling hills, and people are, a lot of times they're a long ways apart from each other, so the density is very light. And but it is just an extreme challenge to figure out how to get to each individual location in those types of areas. And so we have been working on building our fixed wireless network since 2004. And we already cover a substantial amount of Yamaha County. But we, as Abishai said to you, that it's not a good, it doesn't make good business sense for us to spend large amounts of money, like $15,000 a household or whatever it might be, and whatever number might be up to look at customers that we are gonna, charge minimal amounts of revenue for. The return on that investment is so far out. And it's not that we don't want to do it, but we have a for-profit business we're running. And at some point, it just isn't. We just aren't able to do that. So this type of an opportunity would allow us to move those priorities to the top of our project list and really focus on the least served areas and the most underserved or unserved individuals in our county, which is not how our project, priorities go today. And so it'd be a complete game changer for, how we went about getting service to customers. The methodology that we're proposing, the fixed wireless service, it's not the greatest internet in the world. If we could get fiber hooked up to every single customer, we would love to do that. That's impossible in any type of reasonable financial model to do that. So this is the next best thing. We've been doing this for, like I said, over 15 years. We have thousands of customers in Yamaha County that are able to work from home and to do remote schooling and video conferencing and all the things that they need to do using this technology. And we're just confident that if we could upgrade our network, add more density, add more locations, strategically focus on those underserved and unserved customers, that we could do a lot with this money. And when we talk about what it costs to do, what we're looking at to do this project, I will tell you that since 2004, we have the minimum amount we have invested in our wireless network year after year is about $1 million. So every year, $1 million. So if you say that, if you look at what's left for this project, that's money that we would be spending. We'll just focus where we're going to spend that a little bit differently.
How do you define underserved and What-
And so,
unserved?
so there's a few customers, there are customers out there that have no access, so they couldn't even get satellite broadband service. There's nothing out there. There's some customers who, because of their location, they can't get satellite service. They can't get fixed wireless service right now because there's not a transmitter close enough to where they're at that they actually see their location. And they can't even get cell phone service because of their location. So they are literally, when they go home, no access to anything. Then there's another significant portion, or another, a good portion of them are people that are just underserved. So maybe they can use their cell phone, but they can't get any other broadband service. So that's great, except for that if you have a child who needs to homeschool and needs a computer, then your cell phone service, internet doesn't do a lot of good for that. So you need more broadband to accomplish the things that you need.
Thank you.
And then how many, there's a, provide a higher level of existing service to these, or the existing rural customers, and then there's the 4,000 unserved at the last mile, and then there's the middle mile to the remaining. And so I was wondering if you could kind of explain that a little bit more. It's new to me.
Yeah, no, it's fine. It's very hard to succinctly explain all of this in a paragraph.
Totally.
It's-
I was like, I need a math equation.
So, I mean, we have a good portion of our existing customers that are able to get the bandwidth necessary to do the kinds of things we're talking about. Remote education, remote work, telehealth, video conferencing. We have a good portion, I would say 80 to 90% of our 1,857 customers could get the amount of bandwidth necessary to do those things that they want to do. Then there's another subset of customers that we could get service to, but because again, the way that our network is built, and we've obviously strategically put equipment in tower locations that can reach the most amount of people,
yeah.
right? So all of those people who live in areas that, that are the most dense get the best service, and those are most of our customers. But there's a whole nother subset of customers that we already could get service to, but the problem is because our service in those areas is not as dense, and we don't have as much equipment up, and we don't have as much internet going to those locations, we can't give them the speeds that those other customers get. So they might get 3-in-1 or 5-in-1, which maybe would allow them to do a video conference, but couldn't allow them to remote work and have their student be remote distance learning at the same time. Like probably not 2 people online at the same time. So they're restricted in, that's kind of underserved, like they're restricted in what they can actually do with the internet that they have. And then there's another subset of people that we are, without expanding our network and adding more tower locations, we currently have no way to offer them anything, not 3-in-1 or any other. Is that helpful?
Thank you.
Yes.
Okay.
And at least 2 of us here are people who understand. I mean, this guy understands all of what you're saying, but 2 of us understand the challenges.
I'm unserved.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Need to, come clean.
And I'm proud of having one of your service techs come out and say, "Yep, there's no fixed wireless for you." So I do know what you mean when you talk about that.
Yeah, it's very disappointing to people when we arrive on scene because a lot of times we're their only host.
Mhm.
That's how we felt.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's okay.
But we could put a tower up in some strategic locations.
Right. Commissioner Olson, do you have any other questions
No,
or thoughts?
I think, as I said earlier, I think that fixed wireless is like that for the rural areas and even some smaller areas where there might be a higher densification.
Mhm.
Well, there I use one of those words. But I think that's the way to the future. I think Online Northwest has jumped on that by getting their licenses and everything.
Mhm.
Because that's why in middle mile, the ability to have a higher density by putting in more towers, more locations, serves even the best of customers, you know, so my only question would be on the carriage reimbursement. Other than that, I have no question. I think this project, we've been talking about it for years and years. Online Mac has been working on it. They did a great job in Dayton and a great job in Willamina. And I think for our rural areas, I have no problem in supporting this whatsoever.
I do have the questions surrounding whether or not we can have any confidence that this is reimbursable. And then also the timeline is, I mean, you know, it's November almost.
Right, so the timeline, again, our understanding is kind of the way, you know, we're dealing with grant funds to businesses through our grant programs, right? Is that when it comes to those sort of grant approaches, the responsibility of the county is to get the funding out before the end of the year. But to be able to allow the businesses to project a timeline to actualize those funds into the project is acceptable. So again, another reason we're not asking to enter into a contract, because there is no reasonable project that could play out between now and the end of December to provide an impact worthy of asking for $500,000. So we need to give this project the amount of time that it deserves. And that's why one of the reasons we're taking the approach to the grant.
And I would add that in Polk County, the county entered into a contract with an internet service provider. And so they're struggling because they have to, you know, they're invoicing and they need to get all the invoicing done by the end of the year. So now they're lobbying the federal government to extend the deadline. So I want to make sure that we are not caught in that.
Well, that's why because knowing what they've been up against, and they really were up against the clock on this with their only provider, there was no other option, and they really did have issues.
And I would just highlight on the contracting portion of it, that even though we have a local declared emergency, the fact that these are federal funds, there's a lot of questions still out there about whether or not, even if we have we've exempted ourselves from some procurement, but I don't believe we're exempted from the federal procurement. So that's just something to consider, you know, with the rules around that.
Sure.
And how you end up coming to awarding a contract. And again, that's contract, but we're not talking contract.
Yeah.
So, you know, that's, I don't want to go down, you know,
Yeah.
I think it's good we're not going down the contract path. Because then there's questions about procurement. And
Right.
RFPs and how we do this. As far as the grant, you know, we still, while not a contract, we would still have to have a grant agreement in place with those timelines and conditions associated to that. You know, so then, yes, the expense is recorded to the county. We submit reimbursement because we awarded the grant, but there still has to be strings and, you know, attached to the funding that's being awarded to make sure, you know, that it's being spent on what it was proposed and what it was awarded to be spent on. And so making sure that we have that grant agreement in place, so if it's not being used correctly, you know, we have some protections in it. As far as, you know, and we'll continue to look at it. I mean, there's treasury guidance that's coming out on a frequent basis. I think the latest FAQs that they put out, they just keep adding additional guidance. So it is something that's evolved. You know, the only concerns that I have is just making sure that we have those agreements in place because of the amount of funds that we're talking here. The second part is the amount of the request. And just, I want the board to be aware that to date, our original CARES Act, it's not really an allocation, it's what we can get reimbursement up to.
Yes.
So that number was right around 3.6 million. To date, we've already made $1.6 million in reimbursement requests. Now, that seems like, you know, we still have a couple $1 million left for reimbursement. However, this doesn't take into account the Oasis project that the board approved, which is $400,000. The grant program that was just opened up, which is $500,000. We also are pending, I just processed the invoice, I haven't submitted reimbursement, but we had the $10,000 for the early learning, child early learning survey project that we funded with CARES Act fund. I coded the invoice, but we haven't submitted for reimbursement yet. They'll be in the next round. And then we still have anywhere between now and the end of December, because I have a whole laundry list of expenses as far as direct county operations related to the jail and all the other operations that we have. You know, that's another $500,000 to $600,000 of requests that we're handling as well. So that number starts to dwindle really quickly. You know, and so I'm just putting that out there. If we fund the $500,000, that's pretty much going to close the door on any additional requests, you know, beyond what I've just listed that I've identified.
Right.
And that's if, you know, I'm really trying to control our direct expenses, you know, as far as direct coded expenses in the county, you know, whether it's the, you know, expenses related to jail, public health, HHS, our own facilities and all the work, you know, that we could get reimbursed for. You know, there's a whole laundry list of other categories that I need to make sure that we have sufficient funds to cover those expenses. So just putting that out there, that as far as the total amount, we have about 2 million. With this included, we're gonna spend that down pretty quickly.
So to clarify too, thank you, Ken. I thought that the community requests, it was 350,000 of CRF and then 150,000 of ONC fund. Is that not what the request was?
For the grant program?
Yeah.
I don't remember how that got broken out. A portion of that we believe to be reimbursable because it's directly COVID related.
Yeah.
And a portion of it may not be. So
Right.
I think there was kind of some contingency planning there. And we built into the application process questions that identify whether or not the project is related to COVID so that we can seek reimbursement.
Right.
But I think,
Yeah.
yeah, you're right that there was some of that, assuming it wouldn't all be covered approach.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay. But thank you.
And just to kind of also share, we are in the 11th hour of kind of reaching the end on the timeline, right, to expend the funds. And not to present a more urgency, you already know that. And as county administrator has already expressed, there's things he's looking at to try to say what else could we seek reimbursement for. From Centor's perspective, we don't really see any other projects coming before the board with any significant asks because we're running out of time to even identify and support those projects. There are a couple of projects around childcare throughout the county that might still be able to pull together in short order, but their request for funding, if it were to come to the board, would be very small. And/or we are directing some of these service providers to seek funding through the county grant program. So this is the last of significant grants that Centor plans on putting in front of the board at this point, unless we are directed otherwise to seek additional projects for consideration, or if, you know, Carrie Martin or other county staff have projects that I'm not aware of. But from our perspective, we don't have more to bring to you.
Actually, based on if this is approved, this would be, what I'm saying is,
This is the
this would be
Yeah.
it.
Right.
As far as any other additional large projects moving forward, anything that is specifically identified in CARES Act.
Well, it's based upon what I'm reading here, this has the potential to cover a lot of people in the county. So from my perspective, that is very helpful, especially with COVID and with how it's now become a marathon and not a sprint. I'm seeing that even though there's the end of the year and we have to spend the money by the end of the year, that the need continues, especially for internet service.
Absolutely.
So I definitely get it. I appreciate too, one of your other projects was really specific for like very, very tight groups of people in very tight areas. And I'm really glad to see that this is improving service to a lot of different people, including making it accessible to some people for whom it wasn't. So
And
thank
we've been
you.
saying, let's try to use short-term funding for long-term solutions. We know that this project will serve people who are distance learning and will serve people who are working from home. So we know that, right? That's clear, and there is some data that we can easily provide to show that. If we need specific data to help the county kind of on the back end, make sure that due diligence is just kind of captured, right? How many people, what is the exact expectation? We can certainly provide that. But from the perspective of, does this meet the type of need that we're trying to serve? That's the clear yes. Obviously,
Yes.
whether it's this project or a project similar to it, extending reach throughout the county is vital and obviously impactful.
Yeah, I guess my only comment is, and I think Ken makes some good points, because we have other county expenses that he hasn't gone through yet in Road 5, we need it. But on the other hand, since this is such a priority, I would rather use that money, that COVID expense money from the program, from the CARES program to do this, because one thing I will not do or do not want to go is come the end of the year, I don't want to see Yamhill County giving any money back to the state. I don't care if it means we have to fund a couple more of our own small things, but I don't want to give it back to the state and let them determine how it's going to be used.
I see what you mean. Yeah. I love watching Commissioner Stan's facial expressions
I heard you say you
when
want to
you
give it
say
all back to
things.
the state, man.
I was watching you and I was saying, give the money back to who? And I'm thinking, well, no. But I don't like the philosophy where we've seen this play out with COVID
Yeah.
money, is everybody's got to, grab the money, spend it, and then just not give it back. I don't like that philosophy, but I also realize that when it comes to, and I'm going to just be honest, when it comes to the state of Oregon, I think we can do much better with funds than the state of Oregon can. So I agree with
Well,
you,
it's proven.
Be honest.
Commissioner. I do agree. The only thing I'm concerned about is just sort of erring on the side of not, rolling the dice on that we won't have any significant 11th hour types of expenses that we're not even seeing. And I know that right now, really, it's, do we want to take the chance and spend this money, which, it makes all the sense in the world, but how do we do that to where we're actually also being smart about making sure that we're covered on the other end? So-
It sounds like there's around $500,000 right on the back end, if this project is considered. Still for expenses, or am I getting, I got a little lost in the numbers, so I apologize, but I want to make
You
sure I
had-
understand as well.
Well, and that's why there's no definitive number.
Fair.
And I'm just putting it out there that based on some projections on missing, based on the trends and what I've been seeing, what we've been seeking reimbursement for up to this point, in addition to some additional costs that we're also still looking at. This puts us with a balance on my estimate right around 150,000.
That's what I was getting, yeah.
Yes.
I'm sorry, we did this in a pretty quick order, got this document together and got everything together. I only talked to Abishai about this last week and I was out of town. So we really worked hard to get something together. We are constantly building and engineering and planning, so it's like I can pull some stuff together pretty quickly, but as you can see with the document we got, there's no official budget, there's no materials list, there's no, we've got a lot of work to do, right?
Yeah.
But we have no doubt that this is a $2 million project, so coming to you for $500,000 didn't seem, there's no question that it's at least that amount of
Sure.
money, right? But what I would say to you, in this situation and the timeline that you have is, we're doing this work anyway. We're committed to putting funds in. We've already put funds in. If you can help us with the funding, we can move much more quickly and target it to specific people. And so if it's a possibility to say up to, $500,000 and let it play out for you for the rest of the year, to figure out what, might come into play to make that less, if it comes out to be 475 or 450. I can't sit here today and tell you, if you only gave me $450,000, this project can't happen. I can't say that to you. Things are gonna happen It's just that we're trying to be as, quick about it and as fast as we can in purchasing and, leveraging the time that we have to get this done, because we know that COVID is lasting into 2021 and homeschooling is not going away and remote work is not going away. And this is not something that we can wait on. And we would love to move quickly, so.
And I'll just, thank you. And I just wanted to just quickly say, I'm not advocating one way or the other. It's up to you. All I'm trying to do is just try to present, here's the number situation if you're looking strictly, if you want to ensure that the list of projects that we're looking at funding, if we're considering that we want to make sure that all of these projects are reimbursable under the CARES Act, I'm just trying to paint a picture of what the parameters are for the CARES Act. Now, there's a whole other budgetary discussion about what fund we're going to pay for this, because what we get reimbursed and what changes we need to make in the appropriation authority within those individual funds, that's going to be another piece to the puzzle that we can work out. But I just want to be careful. And I don't think it's the ask that, and I'm not advocating to fund or not to fund or anything like that. I just want to make sure that the board has the information related to it, because there's a lot of discussions around the CARES Act. Then there's the budgetary portion of it as well, that we can make it work if the board approves this. And I just wanted to
we
put
totally
that out there. I'm
Sure.
not, because I recognize that I do think this project does fit within the categories. When you look at it, there's a lot of need for teleworking in school and everything. I just want to make sure that when the next project comes and there's an ask for that, and you look at me and it's like we don't have any money.
It'd be a really short agenda item.
I just want to make sure that you have the full picture in the funding situation when you're making your decision.
So I'm wondering,
Go ahead. I think that what I have found out through COVID, which I don't like find out anything because I don't like it, but anyway, I think what companies have learned, and I think Yamhill County will do the same thing, is that if you have good, now that a lot of people are working at home, that I'm all for opening schools. I think we need to get our schools back open. But in the meantime, I think it's important. But what I'm seeing, or what I believe I'm seeing, is that those companies that allow workers to work at home, that can actually do their job at home, what it's causing, and it could cause it in Yamhill County, I don't know, but it's causing as they look at new facilities, new brick and mortar, they've been able to downsize their footprint of the brick and mortar. I mean, because they can have people working at home. And I think that's the wave of the future. I think Online Northwest and Kathy and everybody realizes that once COVID goes away, there's still going to be a big demand from people to work at home so they don't have to spend as much on brick and mortar.
right. I guess one way to think about this, because Kathy, I think, made a good suggestion, or I heard in there a good suggestion. And this is kind of a risk management thing, is maybe get some harder numbers, work together, bring a proposal to us that we can approve even next week. That would be a guaranteed amount of money initially, like a grant of $250,000 or something like that, half of the initial request, and then hold on until the end of the year for the other $250,000 to make sure that, as Commissioner Sterrett put it, there isn't something that we have no idea what's going to happen. And that would give us a $400,000 like cushion in the CRF allocation. Do you know what I mean? Because we don't actually know what's going to happen in the next 2 months in terms of COVID dynamics within the county.
Well, and I'll just speak to that, we'll adapt, because
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of the funds that we're looking at, if we're in a situation, like for public health or responding to things, I mean, that's why we have contingency funds and reserves and something other that adapt. So I do think we have a little bit of flexibility. I would probably advocate, if this is something that the board wants to approve, I would just approve the grant.
Oh, okay.
because one of the challenges that we're gonna run into is I would like to get an agreement in place and then issue the check, get the reimbursement in place. Because some of the risks or concerns that I would have is if we start getting into December and the state and DAS says,
Oh,
well,
yeah.
I see you
Yeah,
have,
yeah.
you know, a
That's a
certain
good
amount, it doesn't look like you're gonna spend that, even though it may be earmarked, and then we could, the state could
They
take
will,
action
not
and
could.
just not release the funds.
Yep.
So my
I think it's-
recommendation, I think it's, I recognize, I think that's a good way to kind of plan for it, but I would say if the board is interested in funding the project, I would fund it and then we do the agreement for at least the full amount, so then I can go ahead and get the reimbursement.
Okay. Okay.
I would agree to that, and I just want to add that we're seeing that happen with state funds for business grants,
Oh,
where
yeah.
they're being retracted by November 15th, so that the state can try to reallocate them to other regions, before they have to give the money back to the feds. And so we are aware that there is, there's not only potential for that, but that it is definitely happening. It's already been planned in many of these instances.
We'll just tell them some of this are retracting, so they don't have to get back to the feds. Just tell them we'll take it in Yamhill County for some more projects.
Just send them our way.
Yeah.
If another county can't spend it, we'll spend it for them.
Well, thank you, everybody, for
Thank you.
having this discussion. It sounds like there is interest in moving forward.
I'm certainly interested
Okay.
in this.
I want, because this would possibly would improve my internet, I do want to, again, declare a potential conflict of interest. I think this is the 5th time in Kathy Tate's presence that I've done this, but
I really appreciated what Kathy said about the up to, because I think obviously this project is going to cost more than $500,000. So it's not like you need a project plan at this point. And so the money is, obviously that's coming up with that is an exercise. But again, I'm a little reticent just because it's a gamble. I mean, we don't know. And I'm looking at 2020 and anymore, nothing surprises me. And I keep holding my breath, waiting for it to be December 31st. But so I am concerned, number one, because I guess philosophically I am a little sort of opposed to using taxpayer dollars for these types of infrastructure improvements when you're talking about broadband. So that's how I feel. But I also see the wisdom in using the money for this project, since you're willing to go forward with it in terms of your project anyway. So I don't know. I would vote in favor of it reluctantly.
Yeah.
And I am sort of leaning towards not because of the money, but I also think that, we have the opportunity, so.
Well, one of the things I look at, Commissioner, is it's interesting that you brought that up, that when we have people that are out of work because they have to keep somebody at home, either a mother or the father, if there's two working or whoever, to take care of the new childcare, because our childcare is sorely lacking. If this program allows even some of those parents to work from home and yet take care of their child, I think that's a big thing for I think it's a big thing for childcare too.
There's no question
That's a
about the
good point.
fact that, it really will serve people. But I also know when those of us who live rurally choose to live rurally, to ask taxpayers to fund a utility that we don't have and didn't have access to, I do have some sort of misgivings about that, because I just think that this is taxpayer money, and that's always where is the money coming from and who is it? So it's sort of a fine line, but I would go along with
Yeah,
it.
well, that's it. And I think you brought it up Kim brought it up well, is that a lot of these kind of grants we give, I have, for the same reason, have the same kind of feelings. But then I have to look at two things. If we don't use it, somebody else will. So it's going to affect taxpayers' money anyway. Might not be in Yamhill County, but it's going to affect taxpayers' money. And then the second thing I always look at is, what do we want Yamhill County to look like, both socially and economically, 5 years from now?
Mhm.
And so to me, yeah, it's a risk, and I'm really concerned with that, but if it makes a difference in the economy, makes a difference in healthcare, makes a difference in child support, makes a difference in all things, I'm for it.
And when you asked that question, I know it was kind of a rhetorical one, but I want to see rural areas thriving. I mean, that's my basic. When you ask that, and I imagine it, that's what I want to see, and I know that will help. Is having good internet. You may have to come down to the Fenton house less.
Well, it's not any better in my
Oh, that's
office,
right.
so
Yeah, never mind.
kind of I can't
I
win.
had 5-year wireless into my office.
Okay.
I'll go to
So
your
I have
office.
double.
Well, then, yeah, do you have any? Okay. Thank you, commissioners. Thank you, Abhishek. Thank you, Kathy, and thank you, Ken, for.
So
There's a lot of, I learned a lot in the course of this half an hour or so.
because you're gonna be the guru when I'm gone.
Oh, I'm actually passing up all expertise. We're just pushing it over there.
Why aren't you just supposed to say you're gonna give it to Lindsay and let her do it?
Well, with that, I would move approval of funding the Yamhill County Rural Broadband Expansion Program at the $500,000 request. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign? The record show unanimous approval of item I7 as amended. And then we'll probably need to have a discussion about where the appropriation authority is, right?
I'll do some work on that.
Okay.
Figure out where the funds are gonna come from. And then also, what we'll probably do is once we'll need to draft an agreement, so we'll come back.
Yeah.
Once we're able to get the agreement, because we don't have something like this just readily available that we can just tell them. So we'll need to put together a draft, or a grant agreement. So, working with county council and so that'll come in.
I think his ears perk up whenever you say agreement and draft, so.
Well, I can't wait, since we're gonna we've accepted the grant now, can we put a little part in our grant thing, or one of our requirements, that we only give the $500 grant if Abijah moves McMinnville?
Oh, she just remodeled her house.
That's a good reason, it's a good marketable
Oh,
situation.
just the kitchen, okay. Yeah, well, there's Yamasa in her world too, that we need to consider.
I want to thank you for your time. I also want to thank staff for their time. I know these projects take a lot of staff time, and I certainly appreciate the support they provide. And every time, like you mentioned, when I come in and we talk about, oh, there's a contractor agreement, I see the same gleam in Kristen's eyes, so I just appreciate everyone's time.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay,
Thanks,
thank you.
Kathy.
I just wanted to say thank you also, and, Online Northwest is, really loves being in this community, and we have such a wonderful relationship with so many people here, and have such a great group of employees, and, this is gonna be a very valuable and worthwhile project for us, so we're excited to have your support.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank
Kathy.
you,
Thanks a
They
lot.
speak pretty well of you too.
Thank
Your
you.
employees, that is.
Thank you.
You know, being at this will allow them to hire 2 or 3 additional employees.
Yes. I will move on to item J, which is public hearings, and we have none, thankfully. I move on to item K, which is announcements.
We
And
have
I'm
none.
happy to hold mine because I
I
was
am
supposed to
too.
be somewhere at 12:30.
I will
I
hold
thought the other
mine as
one.
well.
Okay, Christian?
No.
All right, Ken?
Mention, you want this stuff back from this morning?
No, it's fine. I mean, you can get back to it. That's
Well, I'll
fine. We'll
keep
take
if
it.
you don't.
I have a whole list of announcements.
No, you don't.
I was like, I don't know if he's
You have too big
serious.
of a list. and we'll
Carolina,
give
do
you
you
a
have
couple
anything? Okay,
announcements.
with that, we'll close this meeting of the Yamhill County Board of Commissioners.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
Phew.
You know,